Like many people, was very concerned with like how many calories I was getting, how many grams of protein, how many grams of fat, how many grams of carbs, how many grams of fiber, how much sugar did something have, only to later realize that.
Hello and welcome to How We Are Healing, the podcast where real people share vulnerable stories and life-learned lessons. I'm Tristan, friendly yoga teacher and your host through the darkness towards healing, one conversation at a time. And now, on to the episode. Hey, I'm trying to heal over here. Well, hello and welcome to the How We're Healing podcast. My name is Tristan and we're here with
Andrew,
thank you for being here. So as you know, the podcast is all about how we're healing. And with that, I kind of wanted to open the floor to you and have you just describe a little bit about your journey as much as you want to share.
Yeah, of course. Well, today I am a gut health expert. I'm also a yoga teacher and also I own a spa. I'm all about how we're healing. I love this and I love that you're starting this project because for me, I am fascinated with the human body. I'm fascinated with the human body's capacity to heal. And I'm fascinated by all the bullshit that gets in the way of that. And so...
Oh, you mean us?
Yeah. And so, I mean, a big part of my journey has been, understanding ways that my own bullshit and other people's bullshit that they put onto me kept me in dark places and kept me, when I say dark places, like it's not just the actions, not just the habits, it's not just things that are maybe on the outside, but also like at a much more dangerous level, I think is all the subtle stuff. Yeah. So like all of that self-neglect or self-loathing or self-mutilation, whether or not that happens outside or whether that's just how you're talking to yourself, right? Like most people are walking around on the street just self-mutilating inside, right?
Totally.
Or if they're not doing that to themselves, it's directed to somebody else. And if it's not, where is that coming from?
Right.
Other than unresolved stuff going on inside.
Hurt people, right?
Yeah,
a
bit of that.
Wow. What has been helpful for you in terms of like mentorship or guru? Like, would you consider yourself someone as having a guru or do you have mentors? What is like the role others have played in your journey?
Okay. I will respond to the guru question after my mentor question.
Okay.
So for me, I feel very blessed for my mentors that I've had within the yoga world and also within Ayurveda. For those who don't know, who are not familiar with Ayurveda, it's an ancestral healing science that comes from India. It's often considered the sister science of yoga, but really it's a science about how does the body, mind, and our consciousness heal, right? And how do we do that in relationship to nature? Right. And that's really the essence of it. And so I was very much in this space years ago where I was very disconnected from my body and I was very disconnected from food and I was very disconnected from what food actually did to my body. I think I, like many people, was very concerned with like how many calories I was getting, how many grams of protein, how many grams of fat, how many grams of carbs, how many grams of fiber, how much sugar did something have, only to later realize that actually our body doesn't speak that language.
Right.
Our body speaks a totally different language. And so actually to understand how to heal the body at a physical level, you have to understand your body's language. You have to understand where places are shut down or where they're constricted or where they're too open or they're too weak. You have to understand whether they're too inflamed, right? Or whether they're too isolated or cut off. And so we can see that through our symptoms. And really, I have one Ayurveda teacher, who taught that if you can understand something known as the Gunas, which is the qualities, and in Ayurveda, not just the 3 gunas that we know in yoga, but the 20 gunas. And it's just 20 ways of looking at any substance.
Are the 20 gunas, like I'm aware of the 3, I've never heard it described as 20. Is this like the 10 pairs of opposites?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
okay,
this is the 10 pairs of opposites. And there's Ayurvedic texts that say everything in the universe, both animate and inanimate, is made of 5 elements.
Right.
And those 5 elements have qualities. Right? And so just thinking about this sofa, I mean, like, it's kind of nice, it's cushy, it's there, but there's I've slept on some hard-ass sofas before, for example.
Both called sofa.
Both called a sofa, very different, right?
Yeah.
So that goes to say, like, not all food is made equal, and we don't, as a society, tend to look at the qualities of food, which I also call the functional aspect of food, right? We just think something, it has a lot of antioxidants, it should be good for me, right? And the problem with that is when we get down... Well, really, when we start shooting on ourselves, left and right, of all the things we should be doing, if our body's telling a very different story, then it doesn't matter what we're doing.
Right.
It doesn't matter what we think we should be doing. If your body is telling one story, and this is a lot of people that I work with when I work with gut health and when I teach gut health, it has that Ayurvedic spin, because really it's about that. It's about, if you don't understand what your body is saying, if you don't understand that each food has a function and you don't know how to pair those, then it doesn't matter if you think you're following what society says is healthy,
Right.
which also, if we're realistic about it, I mean, milk was like so healthy 100 years ago, and now it's like, oh, it's actually not that great for a lot of people, right? It's always very much a cultural narrative around food, and around what is, I mean, even breakfast food, right? If you just look at breakfast foods around the world,
Right.
there's all sorts of different things. There's no what food should be breakfast, right? And so we get into this place of thinking like, oh, well, I'm going to study science or nutrition, and you know, what are the experts saying about what is healthy or what I should be eating?
Right.
And a lot of people follow those rules only to find their health gets worse and worse.
Right.
So the question is why? And I think the reality is we're disconnected from ourselves.
So yeah, this has been brought up a few times. How would you say you best help people identify what it is that their body actually needs, right? So how to listen to their own bodies. Is there a process that you use?
Well, so I really work with those 20 gunas, because I was going to say that one mentor said, if you master the 20 gunas, you've mastered the whole of Ayurveda.
Oof.
Yeah, which is like, it's such a like fundamental basic thing, but it's like people think, when they've heard of Ayurveda, they've heard of like doshas, or they've heard of, maybe you've heard of Agni, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like these are kind of things that people will get familiar with, but the reality is that the qualities actually make up the doshas.
Mm-hmm.
So like you can't have a dosha if it's not multiple qualities meeting.
Right.
Like just take, for example, Pitta dosha. It's fire and it's water, it's hot, it's metabolism, it's transformation, it's light, it's at the end of the day, it's oily, it spreads. It's like why you get a rash, any inflammation, and it starts to spread,
Right.
because that's those qualities. But if you're just hot, then like you're just hot, but it doesn't necessarily lead to an inflammatory pattern. It doesn't necessarily lead to a disease pattern, because the disease pattern is more complex. The disease pattern needs multiple elements coming together
Right.
and kind of going awry. And so really, if you can figure that out, and the way I like to teach it is first understanding it in like your food, right? And Tristan, there's an epidemic of dry. There's an epidemic of dryness.
Dry. Well, everything's in a bag or a box.
Everything's in a bag or a box,
Yeah.
and so thus it needs to have no moisture.
Right.
And normally it needs to have a lot of preservatives. Normally it needs some good degree of salt. And the reality is people love these days their convenience foods. You know?
Crunchy. We love crunchy.
Crunchy. And I
Yeah.
had another mentor, a yoga mentor actually, and she said people in the West seem to love crunchy foods because it's the only food that's louder than their mind's chatter.
Stop.
And I was like, good deal.
It's like, work.
Yeah.
Work that phrase.
Yes,
I love
yes.
that. Work that phrase.
Work that phrase.
It's
Work
so
that mental chatter.
true.
Well, and my thing is, I think it actually, the one way I can see it, I love that, and I love that observation, but it actually is so rooted in that our body is subject, and our body's rhythms is actually subject to something outside of us. So it's subject to our employers, or it's subject to our partner, or it's subject to our dog, it's subject to these other things, and we've just become so accustomed to that we don't honor our own rhythm first and foremost. And so that's the thing, is like when we recognize like, no, my body actually has a rhythm, then we recognize, no, oh wait, am I hungry? Like you have more of a chance to check in with yourself. Like, what do I actually feel? Oh shit, I'm tired. Instead of like, wow, I really should go to the gym, or I should go. Well, like, but I'm tired.
Right.
So
well,
your
rather
body's-
than ask, am I hungry? We ask, what time is it? And that
Exactly.
right, and that informs the eating. But
Exactly.
that's because of job and dog and schedules and partner and things outside
Exactly.
of ourselves. It's
Yeah.
so true.
Yeah. So the food. So when we actually nourishing our body,
Yeah.
we've outsourced that to somebody else to decide. And how we're nourishing our body, so many people have outsourced that for somebody else to decide. Whether it is sadly with like processed foods, or whether it is with, health experts, right? But really, you are the health expert of your body.
Mm-hmm.
It's an N=1 study.
Yeah.
This is part of the, I guess, we're gonna get controversial here.
Let's do it. Get
Okay,
in there.
but this is my thing. I don't think that there needs to be any battles or any wars between Ayurvedic medicine and modern medicine. In fact, I think they need to work together.
Yeah.
To me, that's the future of medicine, is actually understanding that people have been paving the way of medicine for thousands of years, and so to ignore that, to me, is quite stupid. It's quite limited.
Yeah.
And then realistically, like 4 of the last Nobel Prizes in the last 10 years
Mm-hmm.
have basically come from Ayurvedic concepts.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Well,
one of the-
finally, we're like studying it in that Western way. Like
Yeah.
Ayurveda has been studied in the non-Occidental way forever,
Yeah.
and people have been using it, and it's been working.
Yeah.
But it's like that doesn't sell. It doesn't sell to say, oh, don't buy processed food or a pill, right?
Or that, oh wait, most of,
Yeah.
or this reality that 95% of diseases are preventable. And yet we're not focusing more money on preventive medicine.
Right.
Like, we're focusing more and more resources of our human resources to crunch time.
Right.
When realistically, we don't even have to get to crunch time if we stop crunching all these crunchy foods.
Yes. Well, this
Okay, they're not the only culprit, but that's the thing. Is yeah, it's like your body will come to crunch time.
Yeah.
When if you continue to ignore it, or if you choose to nourish it a lot more early down the line, things could look different. And that's a big part of what I teach people. Is like, and why it takes, I guess, a special kind of person is that person who knows that, like, wow, my body actually definitely does speak to me. My symptoms have maybe been dismissed by Western medicine. For example, a lot of digestive diseases are considered incurable.
Right.
IBS is considered incurable. Okay, and also I discovered this. If you go on like WebMD and other places like that, constipation is considered a symptom of IBS. Whereas from the Ayurvedic perspective, we would say, whoa, 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 every bit of health starts in your gut.
Yeah.
Every last bit of health starts in your gut. So actually, you end up with IBS or IBD, irritable bowel syndrome, irritable bowel disease, colitis, all of these other down the line diseases, even diverticulosis, diverticulitis, because something was already up in your gut. That didn't just happen one day and like now you're bloated.
Right.
No, you probably were experiencing bloating, constipation, heartburn, acid reflux. Your appetite was maybe fluctuating all over the place.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Way prior to all of that. That is just, it's like scar tissue.
Right.
You know how it's like when or you get a callus, like your shoes just don't fit right, they're rubbing you the wrong way. What's your body going to do other than adapt? It has to adapt to the fact that something isn't quite right in an area and it's not working for how I was built, right? And this is how, at least Ayurveda sees all progressive diseases, all sort of chronic diseases, is it's a response in to not having had an environment to thrive how we were made. So we really need to understand how we're made. We really need to understand what our body is saying. And there's actually a really concise and pretty clear way to do that when we look from an Ayurvedic lens. And then from that place, then we can start to say, well, how can I actually focus more on preventive medicine instead of just, relying on a pill, a surgery, even fecal matter transfers, like for that matter, which is a very big buzz thing within the gut health world. Like, oh, you can just have somebody who has a healthy gut transfer their bacteria into your gut, and that should solve the problem. But my question is, and I love that, but my question is not, for example, like, why was their gut dysbiosis, right? That's a very good question to ask, but the answer is actually oftentimes quite simple, right? Like, gut dysbiosis being there's a problem with the bacteria in your gut. Maybe it's not healthy, right? You don't have a healthy balance, good bacteria to bad bacteria. That could be as simple as you took an antibiotic.
Totally.
Like, or a steroid.
Yep.
So I'm not really concerned with that. My question is, why haven't you gotten better? So
Garbage in, garbage out.
well, and so
It's like, right?
And the thing is, like, so why hasn't your gut healed? Why haven't the good bacteria that are literally on everything? They're like, okay, well, if you have had yogurt, like, okay, you just got some good gut bacteria. Why hasn't that just fixed your problem? Because the environment of the gut itself is not made to heal. And so we actually have to create an environment where healing can happen. And then when we take that beyond just gut health, that's sort of also my approach when it comes to yoga, when it comes to body work, when it comes to healing at the physical level, and healing trauma as well. It's like, well, we have to have an environment where that can shift. Otherwise, the shields are going to still be there. Otherwise, like, how can you just expect people just to have an open heart, right?
Right.
When, no, there's very good reasons those shields were put into place. There's very good reasons that armor was put up at some point. But yeah,
It's the same as why you can't reach a certain pose in yoga. It's protection. The body, the nervous system is like protecting you. That's literally the wall.
Yeah.
It's from the physical to the emotional, the heart, the brain, all of it.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. And so, like, what led you to become so interested and, I guess, an expert in these things? Like, what was going on in your world? And you don't have to say, because I don't want to trigger. You know what I mean? Like, it's not about that, but it's about honoring your past and about honoring what led you to this place.
Yeah. Well, and I think being able to speak from a place too of something that I know at this point, I'm not the only one who struggled with it, right? And talking about creating that environment, those circumstances where we as a collective can heal, I think we need to have a great deal of much less shame around the fact that, okay, yeah, some of us came from very dysfunctional families. Some of us have struggled with addiction. Some of us have struggled with eating disorder. Some of us have struggled with body dysmorphia, gender dysmorphia. And, you know, all of that is just a bit of my background.
Yeah, right. Just to name a few examples.
Just to name a few.
Just out of nowhere. Nowhere. Yeah.
Right? But we need to not be ashamed of those things, because really, that's where that self-neglect thrives.
Yeah.
Is when we can't ask for help, and we maybe can't even identify what's wrong with us because no one's ever spoken about it.
Right.
Right? And we can't see ourselves in that, right? And we can't see that there's a way forward. So for me, a lot of my healing journey started at a time when I was doing all the things I thought I should be doing for my health. Yes. Right? And I was actually, you know, I was studying nutrition, and I was, you know, not formally, but I, you know, doing what a lot of people do, that good old internet study, plenty of YouTubing, plenty of podcasting, plenty of internet searches, and just figuring out, you know, what was healthy, right? How many calories should I be eating? How much protein should I be eating? I was very concerned with gaining weight at that time, with putting on muscle. And so I was also very much like, okay, in order to do that, I need a calorie surplus, right? Okay, and so then I was trying to aim to like 2,500, 3,000, 4,000 calories a day, which realistically is a lot of food.
That's a lot of time too. Like, right? It's like, I think a lot of people forget that about food, is that if you are trying to pack on that many calories, it's just so much chewing. It's a lot of chewing. That's like it's like, oh my jaw. Oh my jaw.
Well, and not just that, then a lot of people end up doing what? They go to more and more convenient, the
shakes, right? The protein.
The shakes, the protein.
Yeah.
And that's exactly part of what I was doing. So I was, you know, I was like, how in the world am I supposed to freaking, if the math is gonna math, and I need to have a calorie surplus, and I'm also working a full-time job, and I know I need to go to the gym 5 days a week, okay, and I'm burning calories on those days extra, then, okay, how many freaking calories do I need to get, and how am I gonna get that in?
Yeah.
When I go to work at 7 a.m., and then I have an hour break at lunch, and then in the evening, like, I'm pretty exhausted and I don't really want to cook. And I think a lot of people live that way, right? So shakes became, so sexy, so easy, right? And especially, I had one of those protein powders that had like extra carbs in it for, you know, us skinny folks who like can't gain weight easily. So I was, you know, doing all these healthy things. I had all the right protein, I had all the right macros. You know, I was watching my fat, had it in a good range, had my carbs in a good range, making sure to get all my you know, veggies and berries and all the antioxidants and all the things. I had like so many apps on my phone to track so many things. And so at the same time, I was like, why does something feel wrong? And I specifically remember it was a birthday, I think back in 2017 or 2018. It was a while back. And at that time, I went out to brunch with friends. And, you know, you're surrounded by all your friends. It was a table of like 8 of us. And we all ordered, and then I took my first sip of coffee, and I took my first bite of food, and Tristan, I wanted to go hurl. I wanted to run straight to the bathroom and throw up, and I excused myself to the bathroom after like a few more bites of like acting like it wasn't happening. Went to the bathroom, I felt super nauseous, my body felt hot, I felt flushed. And then I was also like, do I need to go to the bathroom? But I'm constipated. I don't know, but I feel really inflamed. And I already went to the bathroom like twice this morning, so like nothing should be coming out. So what's going on? Right. And I remember going back to my friends, you know, keeping it cool.
Classy.
A little bit of orange juice, a little bit of, you know,
stay
a little
in your
bit
lane.
more. A little bit more coffee, and then like a little bit more food, kind of doing what kids do when they're like pushing around their food around the plate.
Yeah.
Very that, you know. Only to like take a few more bites and try and force it, and then realize, no, I need to go to the bathroom again. And I was so frustrated. I spent most of that birthday in the bathroom. Nothing was moving in my gut, and it just all felt stuck, and I felt inflamed, and I felt hot, I felt bloated. And then going back to the table with my friends and like, check please. Yeah. You know? And I remember going home that day and being like, I can't keep living this way. Oh, because this is the thing, this wasn't new. Like, I was daily dealing with nausea. I was daily dealing with constipation. Some nights I would get acid reflux, like, if I would eat too late in the evening, or, like, just my food wasn't processing. I wasn't processing all of those calories I was putting in. Yeah. And so I ended up getting all of these, like, really rough digestive symptoms. And whenever I would go see specialists, whenever I would go see doctors, like, it was either, like, here's a pill to deal with the nausea,
Right.
Here's a pill to maybe get things moving. Maybe you should take some fiber to help you with the constipation.
Fiber, lol. Because at this point you were already eating fiber, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like,
Yeah.
no, that's
Yeah.
not. That's
Oh, yeah.
not the solution.
Oh yeah. I had my like oats.
Yeah.
I had my like flax seeds. I had my chia.
Yeah.
I had all my green leafies. So like, what was the problem, right? And that was the thing. I was so frustrated. Like I remember just being so frustrated, and so broken at that time. Like feeling like I'm like in my early 20s. I feel like I can't eat anything without suffering.
Right.
Which is literally like expected to be a multi-time thing day. My weight on the scale was going up like at a snail's pace, right? Like nothing like what I was expecting based on this math, if the math was going to math as I was told it was going to math. And yeah, I mean, I just was so frustrated. Like I can't even get a diagnosis. Like all of my numbers are normal.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with me, right? Like why do I feel this way?
Yeah.
And it really took like sitting down on my sofa one day with that level of frustration and being like, honestly getting to that place of like, can I even keep doing this? Right? Because food is it's an everyday thing. So if you're suffering in your gut, it's like, at least for me, I definitely was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where else to turn, right? And I remember looking over under my counter, and I obviously had gone to GNC to get the 2-for-1 of those big old protein things. And Tristan, a little voice in my head was like, that's not the problem, but it's part of it.
Interesting.
And I went and I left them on the corner for anybody else who wanted it. You know, one of them was totally unopened, and I was like, have at it.
Wow.
And I then started looking up, you know, like natural digestive cures, and it was when I found Ayurveda amongst all of that, because Ayurveda, as I mentioned, very much about gut health, very much around all of your health starts in your gut. If your gut health is off, everything else is going to be off. Like hormone health is going to be off, your relationships are going to be off, your stress levels are going to be off, like everything else is going to be off in your body. When I found Ayurveda, it was like 2 weeks later, after I just like started making some changes and recognizing like, wow, I was actually doing all the things that were like on the naughty list, and I was doing none of the things on the should-do list, like for my body type. That I realized I was like, wow. So I started making some of those changes, you know, instead of all the cold smoothies, I was like opting for chicken soup. And I was like, I remember being like, wow, a lot of those things like food like my grandma would eat, right? But that was the start of it.
It goes back to grandma, doesn't it?
Grandma knew.
Grandma, she cleans with vinegar, she cooks
Maybe.
with Whole Foods.
She didn't need any of it.
Yeah.
She knew. She was connected,
Yeah. Love grandma for that.
Yeah. And so that's when I started really peeling back like what my body needed.
Right.
But at the same time, I had to really check in with why was I doing any of this in the first place? And my motivation was coming from I was so insecure about my body. I was so insecure about my looks. I was really fed up with, for most of my life, having felt like the skinny, odd, lanky, weird, you know, super tall, stands out in any room kid. And, you know, was very much like telling myself the story of like, well, things aren't working out for me in love because of the way I look. You know, or I can never, you know, I will never get the right partner because of the way I look, or so thinking I had to change how I looked in order to actually be worthy of love and be worthy of acceptance.
Right.
And the more you start to peel that back, like all of the layers of like self-rejection and shame and guilt and like, yeah, body dysmorphia that went into that, even a good degree of it being like gender dysmorphia of like, do I fit in this body? What's this body supposed to do? As a male body, oh, I'm supposed to have muscle. Okay, let's try and put that on, right? Let's try and like do that thing and try and like hide, you know, more and more the essence of what I was, because it was really scary to embrace that essence. And the more that I started listening to my body, I was like, well, that's the first in. Right? Like I can't see your spirit, but I can see what you do with it.
Right.
At the end of the day, because I can see your body. And so now at this point when I work with people, whether it's with gut health or whether it's in helping, you know, heal from chronic pain, which is another area of my expertise, like through body work, through yoga, it's like there's always those deeper layers, because it's the things we've been taught that didn't serve us, and then there's the reasons we still believe those beliefs.
Yeah.
Right? There's something stuck inside of us that keeps us thinking that's the way, that ignoring my body is the way, that maybe if I just keep pushing harder is the way, but it's not the way.
Right. Well, like the one idea that is coming to me from that story, thank you for sharing, is like there is a huge difference between what happens with our health when we stop kind of saying I hate myself and we start saying I love myself.
Yeah.
Right? Like you didn't use those words, but that's kind of what I was interpreting. Is like you didn't feel like you fit in. You felt like a bit more of like an outsider, and that you were trying to check these boxes that society wanted, versus being like, hold up, what actually resonates with me?
Yeah.
What resonates with my soul and who I really am, right?
Yeah.
And like seeing how things change
Yeah.
because of that. That's awesome. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So-
And the problem is, I think, as a society, is that we're not taught to listen to our bodies.
Yeah.
Because I think that would actually be very antithetical to the system.
Agree.
Like if we all were listening to our bodies and honoring our bodies, and we all understood that my needs are as important as your needs,
Mm-hmm.
shit would change.
Oh yeah, like
radically.
like even going back to like school, right? Like you wouldn't have hall passes to go to the
Mhm.
bathroom.
You would just go.
You would just go. You
Yeah.
wouldn't ask for permission either. You might signal that you're going as a gesture of, as a goodwill gesture, but like that's it. Like there doesn't need to be a conversation, especially not an argument or any sort of no there.
Or any
It's-
shaming of
or
like, you've already used your 5 hall passes.
Yeah, it's like, well, hey, I'm going through a thing. Let me go to the phone.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
Well, and
Okay.
even, I mean, just to build on that, like, we might not be sitting for 8 hours in a school preparing to do it for the rest of our lives. So no.
Exactly. No, it's like I do see this as well, this like journey of like the podcast of how we're healing. It also is a little bit of a, hey, do you want to get out of the matrix? You know what I mean? Like it's a little bit of a call to arms for people to like really look at what's going on in their lives and how they're spending their time. Because we do so many things for money, right? We exchange a lot of our time for money often in the office, and it's like, wait a minute, like money's necessary, but the one currency that we all really truly have is time. That's the only thing that you can't get back and that you're constantly spending, right? So it's like
And-
getting people to understand that.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, your health. It's the asset, baby. It is the asset.
It is
You
the
can
asset.
you can have the cars, the homes, the whatever, can go on all the vacations you think you're working towards, all of that. But the only vehicle that one is going to be able to produce those results, and the two is going to be able to enjoy any of that, is the asset. Is the body, is your body. And
Yeah.
so, it's like we can't just put that aside and then hope for the best, hope everything is going to work out. And
Right.
that's like the whole current epidemic of burnout. It's like, yeah, well, like, maybe you could just work a little harder. Maybe you could just go a little longer. Maybe you could just have no boundaries and accept calls or emails and check your email until like your eyes are burning while Netflix is playing in the background, right? Like,
Yeah.
no.
How many screens do we need to put in front of us, right, in order to like cope with the fact that we maybe don't see what we want to see in life because we have to answer the call, answer the email.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you see yourself doing daily that helps you with your health? Like, what are your kind of non-negotiables that you do every day?
Good question. Every day I pause. Because it's like, I could tell you like, oh, every day I go to the gym, every day I do yoga, every day. And it's like, I don't.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, realistically, like,
yes.
Every day I pause just long enough to like recognize like I'm a spiritual person living this human experience. And that if I don't stop long enough to pause, whatever momentum is like running in my head, whatever thoughts are running around in my mind, whatever things I think I need to do, because guess what? I'm still that person. Like I still have all these things of like, oh, I should do this. Some of it's inspiration and some of it's like, I need to go get my laundry today or whatever, right? But it's like stopping long enough to recognize like, oh, what do I need? Yeah. What do I need right now?
Right.
And two questions that are so easy, like so easy is not the answer. So simple and so under-asked is how do you feel and what do you need?
Oh my gosh.
And
no, but really, literally, like, life boils down to those two, doesn't it? Wow.
Because that's the thing, there's so much like of this world of like reparenting and like inner child work and inner child healing. But like, what does your inner child need? Like for somebody to frickin' respond to what they want and what they need. And the only person who's going to really know is you,
right?
As an adult. And so that work, it becomes a daily work of like, making those questions available for your intuition or your inner voice or whatever, or just your inner knowing to come forth. Because if you don't really make space for it, when is it going to come forth? And then how do you make space for it? Well, you pause long enough. And like that for me some days looks like just like I'm doing my dishes and I'm like, oh, I should do this next thing. And then I'm like, okay, actually, can I just have finished one freaking task before I am like on to the next thing? Like now I have to go clean my bathroom. Like, no, like Just
We're obsessed with lists, aren't we?
Yeah.
You know, as a society in general, we love that, like, ooh, checking it off. And
we don't just love checking it off. We love putting more shit on there.
Putting more on there.
Like, it feels good to check it off, so we put more on.
It's an addiction.
It's never ending.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, how do you like let yourself, like, let there actually be a space after something you've achieved, something you've accomplished? Like, how else are you building a life you're proud of, other than, like, looking back and making sure those things are aligned with that?
Yeah.
Like, you don't just end up there.
Right. Or just savoring in general. Just like you said, like, literal pause and just be like, okay, let me just enjoy this moment, enjoy this reflection. Or even if you are doing something like the dishes, enjoy that. Like, so many of us dread it, right? And it's like, it doesn't need to be that way. Just enjoy it for what it is. Oh, my hands are wet and soapy. That's cool, right? Stuff like that. No, really, like, it's a difference. It's a change. So why not?
And that change requires another degree of sensuality.
Ooh.
It requires us to be a little more in touch with our five senses, and in touch with our body, and in touch with our human experience. And that's the thing, I think, for a lot of people, part of the work of healing is either it feels very ambitious, or it's very scary, or it doesn't even quite connect, like, it doesn't really make sense, like, what is that? Because for some of us, our body actually stores so much discomfort, and so much fear, and so much frustration, and so much grief. Like, it's so convoluted and so full of that, actually, to then, like, you know, and I'll give an example for this, right? The people who are maybe telling themselves, like, I can't meditate, or meditation's hard. Like, you as well as I know that actually meditation is literally just when you stop and you take that pause and you close your eyes and you're like, my mind never shuts up. And it's like, because your mind was already doing that.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's literally what was already going on, right? Oh, I feel really uncomfortable. Oh, I need to, because that was already happening, you know? And actually it hasn't had a single chance to express. That's why all that's there. You know, and over time, that I feel like you start to go through what I call the backlog. You know, you kind of like start to process through that so that you get to a space where, like, there is more savoring, there is more delight in that moment, right? And I think that's why a lot of people struggle to take the pause in the first place. And I think if we're too afraid to take a pause and feel what there is, how in the world are we ever going to get to the part where that's pleasurable?
Totally.
You know? Yeah.
Just quieting the mind chatter. And then the other thing that you just said that I love is that you take that time during meditation to process. So it's like, yes, we know that we're there to clear the mind and not have thoughts, or find the space between thoughts, for example. But there is something to be said about, while you meditate, you actually can sit there and process in a way that's, I would say, maybe better for people than trying to do that right before sleeping, or doing that while, you know, fighting with a spouse, or doing that, right? So, like, taking that time to actually process through emotions and you can let your brain run wild while meditating. I think that's like a huge misconception that people have, is they think, no, I need to be in a perfect Zen state while I'm meditating the whole time. And it's like, oh, sister, no. It's like that moment of bliss might just be fleeting, but hell, at least if you get it, like, that's the point.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be a sustained thing where it's thoughtlessness for an hour. It's like, that's lovely, but it might be a little bit unrealistic at the beginning. It's something to build up towards.
Well, and I would add to that, I think a lot of folks who maybe see spiritual practices that are outside of their culture, let's just say, like, okay, I grew up in America, but I'm seeing a yogi meditating, or I'm seeing a Buddhist monk, or I'm seeing, you name it, right? Somebody from a different culture, deep in their spiritual practice, right? Or on that spiritual journey, and just not understanding, like, what's going on. Because there actually might be a projection of, like, you know, okay, well, there's just nothing going on in there. But the reality is, there's normally a whole lot going on in there that is way beyond what most of us even recognize as possible. Like, realistically. So to not, you know, I don't know, to not, like,
it just seems so glamorous, doesn't it? Oh my gosh, look at the monk in his orange and he's sitting there, and you're absolutely right. There's usually a thunderstorm in all of our minds.
Yeah.
That's just how the mind is. Or
it's a lot more complex, right? And that's the thing, is, like, life itself is complex. So, like, for somebody who's dedicated to understanding the mind, and dedicated to understanding themselves, and then if you want to add on to that, dedicated to trying to understand what in the world spirit is, or higher self, or source, or, like, any of that, whatever, you know, like, if you're actually truly dedicated to that level of truth, like, why would you aspire to thinking that there's just nothing going on?
Yeah.
And I would actually say, for the people who think that meditation is just, oh, there's nothing going on in there, it's just peace, it's like, well, there's probably a part of you that deeply craving that.
Right.
You know, like
Right.
there's actually probably a part of you that's like, wow, that would be really nice. You know, like to like not be going berserk in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then even just using the word craving is so interesting because it's like it's attachment and it's suffering, isn't it? So it's like wanting that level of peace, but then actually craving it. It's like, but not the point. It's like, right? It's contradictory in a way.
It's contradictory because the you know the integrity of the action comes through in that we're then acting from that place of craving,
Yeah.
which is for the more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, or it's to like fill space. And so, you know, that's been a big part of my healing journey, right? It's really just recognizing like all the ways that I was trying to numb out from those feelings and all the times that I was trying to just fill time and space.
Yeah.
Just because the void is terrifying. Whereas then if you know, you come around to recognizing actually the void is ever present. It's called the future. It's literally happening right now and also about to continue to happen. But like it's always uncertain, and I think as humans, with some degree of attachment to, you know, to our fears or to our doubts or to our dreams even, of like, you know, like when you're attached to those things, yeah, the void can be scary because what if?
Yeah.
But I think as a culture, if we can come to actually ask what if,
Ooh, without fear,
without that same vibe,
right?
It's actually a really empowering question, because it's like, well, what if I fail? Well, what if you don't? Like, well, what if I'm broken? What if no one will ever love me? What if actually you're super fucking lovable?
Yeah.
Like, what if you're not broken? What if you were broken and like you're the freaking life of the party that everybody is waiting for? Right?
Aww,
like
yeah.
like why can't we just ask better questions?
Or follow it through,
yeah.
Or find its opposite, right? Because we usually do tend to go to those, you know, the fear, the guilt, the shame, or the anger, and it's like, yeah, but what if you didn't feel guilty? Right? What if you felt proud? What if you didn't feel anger? What if you felt joy, et cetera, et cetera? So,
and to add to that, you know, that can also sound very easy and simplistic when we see two ends of a spectrum, because the reality is life happens in between. And that's the same thing with the Gunas, like they're the 10 pairs of opposites. They exist on a spectrum of like hot, cold, heavy, light, like oily, dry, right? They're on this spectrum, and life and everything happens in between. Nothing happens at these extremes. So realistically, it's like, are you ever like 100% always only ever going to be proud ever again? I mean, like maybe, but like, is that also the aspiration, or is it more about like, can you navigate being in that spectrum, right? In a way that doesn't feel detrimental to you, and that also doesn't need to be detrimental to others, right? Especially when it comes to like relational healing, because I really feel like even if we were to ask like, oh, what's the point of all the healing? It's like, yeah, I mean, it could just be that you are in an essence happier, right? But that whether or not you want it to have an effect has a spillover effect,
totally.
Right? And so like every little bit of healing that we do, every little bit of self-support that we do actually puts more of our best foot forward in the world. And that is what makes the world a better place. You know, it's not more selfish people trying to become more happy. It's like, no, recognizing like, well, what if actually you valuing your happiness to the degree that you understand what is taking away from that happiness in your own life, in your own experience, and then you stop doing so much of that.
Right.
And you start doing more of the stuff that does you good. And you just stick by that, knowing that that is a birthright, right? How does that then start to spill over?
Yeah. It goes beyond self-care, doesn't it? Because it's like that analogy of, you know, you put the mask on first so that you can put it on others, right? Like, I don't know if you identify with that, but that is how I feel in my healing journey. It's, well, I've needed to do the self-care to heal myself. I've learned how to do that. I feel like I've got something to say and good advice for it. And now it's like, okay, now I can put the mask on other people. But as soon as you stop putting that mask on yourself, that goes away, you know?
And I'd like to add to that visual.
Yeah.
Even in that example, you're on a plane with 120 other people. Yeah. And you're all going to the same place.
Oh, totally.
So,
like this Earth, right? We're on this spinning rock that is flying through space. Yeah. And no one knows where it's going to go, but it doesn't matter because we're all in it together. Like, it's what we've got. Yeah, and so that's the thing is like, that even that metaphor of like, put your own mask on to first, right? Almost assumes that like, you're there to do that so that you make sure everyone on that plane is cared for, right? So that we all are arriving safe. Yeah. That we're all able to arrive at the same place together.
right? And there is a quote that this is from another mentor, actually. And actually, she's not the one who came up with it. I don't know where it's from. I've heard it's an African proverb. I don't know. But, you know, when you search enough on the internet, like, everybody said it. I don't know. I wish we did know who actually said it so we could honor that. But I think it's something for me that just is very resonant, and I think resonates with a lot of folks. And it's, if you want to go fast, go ahead.
Go ahead.
And if you want to go far, let's go together.
Let's go together.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
And that
a
to me
lot.
is really powerful, because it's
Wow.
it's recognizing, like, yeah, we're all on that plane together. And so, like, let's hold the line. Hold the line, babes, you know? And that involves doing my work, but also involves, like, you know, showing up just as the best and most real part of me.
Right.
You know, because that's what I came here to do.
Totally.
And that's what everybody came here to do.
Yeah. Whether we know it or not. Whether we know it or not. Like, that's been my experience lately is feeling more isolated and actually having to come out of the shell and be like, wait a minute, we're connected. We're all kind of chained together, and we're only going to go as far as everyone is willing to kind of pull the chain behind you to get people to the same level so that we can, like you said, like, go together and go far.
Mm-hmm.
What are the wellness routines that you maybe don't do daily, but you do weekly, monthly, right? Like, I feel like people on podcasts love these, like, oh, that one thing, I'm going to do that one thing and that'll help. But it might help someone.
Are people ready to do that one thing with me, though?
Let's do it! Do the thing! It depends. What are you putting where?
All over my body, fully naked. At least once every 2 weeks, sometimes monthly, depends how I'm really feeling. I love skincare. I love hair care. It's literally, it is the biggest organ of our body, and it gets the least amount of love, because even when people think they're taking care of their skin, they're putting on, like, hormone disruptors and all sorts of, like, crazy ass products.
If you buy it in a box or bag at the store, it's probably not good for you, right? One ingredient. That's, like, my rule. One ingredient. If you buy it, make sure it's one ingredient, and then it's okay for you.
Whole Foods. This is my thing. So even, like, there's a big trend, Beyonce. There's a big trend, like, I'll explain why I said Beyonce in a second. There's a big trend within the healthcare industry in general that is, like, probiotics, they're the solution. And even that, we see that now with, like, hair care and skincare, because, like, oh, guess what? You're not just filled with trillions of bacteria, you're covered in trillions of bacteria. And actually the health of those bacteria influences the functioning of the organ, right? So it influences the functioning of your gut, and influences the function of your skin. That's what most people don't get. And most people also don't understand that both the gut lining and our skin is called epithelial tissue. It's the same type of cell.
Right.
And so it actually needs the same type of nourishing, right? Realistically. So if you were to think in that way, it's like, okay, well, look at your shampoo, or look at your conditioner, or look at your facial cleanser, look at your nail polish. I love my nail polish, and I have sinned here, baby.
Yes.
But the question is, like, open your mouth, pour it down, give it a swish, 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 and then gulp. How is that going to make you feel?
Okay,
then why are you putting it on your skin?
Got it.
Right? And so, in general, it's like, if it's a whole food, why wouldn't you want to rub that everywhere?
Yes.
Okay, so some quick tips for people of, just like some of that healthcare routine that I love. I love to cut me an aloe vera leaf out of my garden. If you can't get one out of your garden, you can get them at, like, most health food stores. You cut that open. You first put it in water. Has to, like, get, you'll see it has an outlet of very interesting fluid.
Is this before you cut it, or like
no,
the whole leaf?
You cut it and then you put the leaf right in water.
Leaf. Okay,
so
wherever
you just snipped it, because then there's going to have some, like, fluid discharge that you don't necessarily want. And then you let that about 30 minutes soak, and then you take that out. You cut the skin off, the edges off, and then you cut that gel into coconut oil. So you put a little bit of coconut oil, put the aloe vera gel, blend, and if you're feeling really frisky, you put a little yogurt in there, blend.
What?
The best hair mask. The best. And then you leave that hair mask on for, like, 20-30 minutes. You can put it in a towel, you can just, like, wild just like that.
And when you're done, like, put it in a tortilla, right? You've got lunch. No.
Absolutely. And it's liver cleansing.
Yes. Okay.
And it's probiotic. It's all the shoulds.
I like this. I've never heard that, and I love it just for that. You know what my mom used to do? Oh my gosh.
Do tell.
Well, okay.
We all want to know.
Good and bad, right? The good is that she would use kind of whole ingredients. She would use baby oil in a blender with carrot, beet, and maybe one other thing, I can't remember. Blend, put it all over her skin, but then she went sunbathe.
for like an hour. And that part is the part where it's like, I don't know if I would recommend that. I don't know if I would go that far. But yeah, her skin was like luggage. It looked like luggage after.
Oh, yeah.
So
Work.
anyway, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like me and her would get along.
Really? I would be down for it
I
if
would
it
go
was
spend-
15 minutes and then nothing more. Like that's where you lose me, is anything after the 15 minutes. I'm like, I don't know if I would recommend that. I don't know if I'm with you. I don't know if I'm there, Mom. I don't know.
Work.
But I like the fact that it was whole food based, I guess.
And if you want, I'll give people my skincare tip as well. So this is my weekly, monthly thing. I make a powder of chickpea flour, rice flour. I put a little bit of turmeric, just a little bit, and then I actually grind up roses in a grinder, like a blender.
The petals.
Yeah.
Are they dry?
Yeah.
Dry roses?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you could use fresh, but that's harder to blend.
Yeah,
right?
don't do that.
Don't do that.
Unless
so
you're
use
gonna,
dry.
yeah, like dried flower petals, dried roses, and then I blend that up also into powder. It smells like a garden. Like, it's amazing. It's so luscious. Mix all those together, and then I apply that to my skin. So that's actually like my facial scrub, and like it's kind of like a more daily thing even. Like, I love to scrub with that. I've like had friends stay over, and then they use my restroom. They're like, "Hey, do you have soap?" And I'm like, "Oh shit." I'm like, I forget every time. I forget every time that people use that.
Right.
I don't because like
No, you don't use soap.
Well, on my hands, yeah, but just
Okay.
that. Sometimes my feet, but
Cool.
mostly just on my hands, yeah.
And this is because soap kind of clears the bacteria, right? It's disruptive.
Most soap is antibiotic, and
Right.
it's super drying, and so like,
And we don't want to be drying this.
no, it literally
Okay.
it's a moisture barrier, and so actually the thing is like,
You're right.
like rice. Okay, so there's multiple things going on with this formula, and just part of it is that like rose and even like marigold or calendula, like a lot of the flowers actually have components in them that help restore moisture balance in the skin.
Okay.
So that, any flower, put it in, it's not just for the beautifying effect or the sensuality of it, it's because it helps actually rebuild the moisture barrier. The chickpea flour is actually a bit more, it helps draw out oils, and so it's kind of more of a good exfoliant, and it does sap off the oils and the dead skin and all of that. The rice, actually, there's a component in rice that when it seeps into the skin, it actually helps boost collagen production.
Hello.
Yeah, so that's like kind of a new thing that like even I think like a lot of science brands, and it arrives to me through the algorithm, but these brands are using like rice water and rose water, and I'm like, well, or you could just use those things.
Right.
And your skin's intelligent enough to know what should and should not be entering you.
Right.
So let's honor that instead of like figuring out how we can make these particles so small they're like direct to your bloodstream and like just gonna roll around wreaking whatever sort of havoc they want without having been filtered by your liver, like.
Well, how do you feel? This reminds me. How do you feel about collagen in general? Because I feel like people do slather on like a collagen-based moisturizer, or they eat the bone or drink the bone broth, that sort of thing. Do you think those things work, or do you think it's kind of like it's not really how the body processes those?
Prefer from the inside, yeah.
Yeah,
because
okay,
actually,
better from the inside than out. Okay,
yeah,
right.
well, and I say this because like from my research I have done on skincare, because that's another big thing for a lot of folks who've suffered with gut health, and I was there in the past. Like, my skin was not luscious, it was not great. I struggled a lot with like eczema. A lot of people end up also with like psoriasis or like adult acne, because like whenever something's going on in your gut, one, it's gonna likely affect your hormones, and two, it's also, it's gonna reflect, as I was talking about earlier, like a scar, like it's going to, a certain type of cell is going to have to adapt in a certain way to being malnourished in the way it's being malnourished, right? And that goes for our psyche and our traumas and our addictions and our weird habits and everything, really, because it's all just built like that. But the reality is like the skin is going to be, like whatever's going on in someone's skin is likely what's going on in their gut.
Whatever's going on in your skin is likely what's going on in your gut.
So if it's like dry and it's inflamed, it's like your gut's probably the same way.
Because it's the same skin cell anyway.
It's made of the same exact cell.
And as above, so below, as inside, so outside.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And so this is a thing. Collagen, actually, like our skin, I am a big believer in collagen, in using it, like, ideally from natural sources. Most of those are animal-based, but there's also, I think there's like, I don't know, I frankly haven't used the fruit, but there's like cherry, or I don't know, it's like there's certain fruits that you can actually use that have their own like gums, like more gums and resins that are more collagenous.
Or what about nopal, like the cactus here in Mexico? Like, because it's got that kind of aloe vera stickiness that might be, I don't know.
I don't know if it has the building blocks of collagen, like those peptides and all of that. I don't know. But what I was going to say as well is like actually like why I prefer inside to out, why I prefer diet-wise versus non, is actually a lot of the times when certain laboratories or big brands, big pharma, right, has actually been able to break down collagen fibers to be small enough to enter the skin. Because actually most collagen in most products, frankly, isn't even small enough. The molecules are not small enough to enter our skin.
Right.
So they're just kind of there.
On top.
On top.
And then you bathe or it rains out or whatever.
It washes out and then doesn't do that much.
That's
right?
why you're recommending in. Okay,
yeah, because then your cells will actually build from the inside out. And a lot of those products sadly do have a lot of hormone disruptors and all sorts of other things going on.
Damn.
Yeah.
So is there another wellness trend that you feel like hasn't broken out yet? Because I feel like you've actually touched upon a few, but are there any other that come to the top of your mind?
Broken out,
like that haven't gotten popular that should? Like wellness trends that are like underutilized, not well known.
Ooh, because there's so many that are so well known,
right?
That are so off, that so shouldn't be trends.
Well, let's go there then.
Okay.
I would love that.
Number one is fiber. God damn it.
Fiber. We're over fibering.
People need to stop with the fiber.
Stop with the fiber.
Yeah. Stop with the fiber supplements.
The Metamucils and that stuff.
Stop.
I agree.
God.
Yeah.
And then so this is the thing. Like I've worked with so many people who have like IBS and like colitis and just like these chronic gut diseases, and the thing is like almost every single one of them is taking fiber, but the thing is because they're constipated. So then, and the general consensus is that if you're constipated you should take fiber,
which means add to the problem,
which for most people adds to the freaking problem. Why? Because if you think about that supplementation, it's different when it comes from whole food sources and when it's in proper balance. There's soluble, there's insoluble. That's a whole nother conversation.
Oh, right.
But when it's coming from these like supplemental factors, first of all, there's no nutrition there. It's literally just fiber that's been extracted, and then you put some water with it. And the second thing is, if you've ever taken those supplements, you know how much water it takes to actually get that down. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. What does this fiber do? What's its function of these supplements is to absorb water. That sounds great if you need something to absorb water to create more form to create a stool. But even that process is going to slow things down.
Because while it's going through your system, it literally will need more and more water, right?
Yes.
It's like, and so, yeah.
And so where is it going to pull that water? If not from you and your cells.
Yeah.
So this is why I said that there's a whole epidemic of dryness, because most people who are struggling with any sort of gut health issue for the most part have an issue with dryness.
Yeah.
And one way people can look at this is like, okay, well, do you experience like gas and bloating? Almost always dryness is involved. Are you experiencing constipation? There's likely some sort of dryness involved, whether that is like rabbit pellet stools, those dry, hard, lumpy, or whether it's the more diarrhea type, which some people experience, more loose, or whether those are alternating, which is sort of like what some people deal with, what some people experience when it comes to like these chronic gut diseases. And the thing is,
so strange to me because it's two ends of the spectrum, right? It's like it's like they're obviously doing things that are creating both of the extremes, and it's like, why is it not balancing? That's really fascinating.
Yeah. Well, why is it not balancing? Because they are overdoing it on the dryness. And the thing is, the dryness slows things down, and it slows down your digestion. So the thing is, like in your stomach, you actually need a great deal of gastric fluids to then break down anything you've just eaten. If that is lacking because there's actually a chronic systemic dryness, then whatever you've just eaten is not going to be fully digested by those acids, sufficiently broken down in that first breakdown part to then go on to the intestine and be readily absorbed by the bacteria there, right? And by the further enzymatic processes that happen in the intestines. So if that first step hasn't happened well, then that processes out into the intestine, which is then when you get bloating. Because what is bloating, and then even gas further down the line, if nothing but the metabolic byproduct, the waste product of those bacteria that are in your gut that are essentially fermenting your food, rotting your food inside of you before you even get to absorb any of it.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
And so that then creates one of two things, right? That then either that's the inflammation is happening, right? Because now there's these metabolic processes, this metabolic stuff that's happening inside of you that can't move on because you're too dry. So then people start to rely on things like coffee to be able to go to the bathroom. Okay, what happens? You have your morning coffee, you need to go to the restroom immediately because triggers peristalsis. And for those people, oftentimes it will come out more liquidy, right? Because you have this whole mass of undigested, unprocessed stuff just in your intestines, and then boom, now it's got to move on. So it spends very little time relatively in your intestine. in your large intestine,
Where the absorption nutrients will
where the
happen,
water
right?
reabsorption needs to happen.
Oh, right, okay.
So the absorption of nutrients needs to happen in the small intestine.
Right.
And then there is minerals,
Mhm.
and then there's also like most of the mineral absorption and also the water reabsorption happens in the large intestine, in the colon.
Okay.
Right?
Mhm.
And so if that has spent very little time passing through, one, you're continuing to be more dehydrated because you haven't reabsorbed that liquid.
Right.
That's why diarrhea is like deadly in some places, right? Because you're literally losing all of that fluid instead of reabsorbing it.
Mhm.
And this is even for people who've had the fiber, right? But that fiber created the problem of the dryness up in the
Oh
stomach
my God.
and the slowness in the intestines, right? And then you are relying on coffee to be able to go, so you're still constipated, and you're like, why am I still constipated if I'm taking fiber,
Yeah.
right? And then the thing is for the other people. Oh, and I was gonna say, a lot of times, if you're having very liquidy stools passing very quickly through your colon, what else is your colon going to do but get inflamed?
Right. Right.
Right? Like, that's exactly the process, right? But constipation is a symptom of all that.
Sure. Yeah,
sure. Fair. And then the other
Wow.
thing of some of these people is like there's just such a systemic dryness that actually, okay, part one, phase one, okay, phase two, okay, then it makes it to the colon. And it's so dry in the colon
Mhm.
that in fact, it's like if your skin was super dry and you're trying to like, right? When is your skin actually going to get things moving along? When you're oily and slicked up and just put lotion or just put oil on your body, or when you're super dry and like flaky?
No,
Like
oily.
which is going to be more easeful to actually
The oily.
to move? The
Yeah,
oily, right?
course, yeah.
And that's actually within Ayurveda, the other end of the spectrum of dry.
Right. It's
Right?
not wet. People
not
think
wet.
you're right. People think that all the time.
People
The
think
opposite of
it's-
dry is wet. It's like, nope.
And so
Oil.
that's the thing. Another thing I see with a lot of people with chronic dryness. Here's another way you can know you're experiencing chronic dryness, what I call chronic dryness from this Ayurvedic perspective, is if you drink water and then you almost immediately need to go to the restroom, and then it comes out very clear. And a lot of these people actually think that they're struggling with some sort of like urinary incontinence, or they have like a weak bladder, or they have frequent bladder issues, right? But the reality is, no, you're just not holding on to the fluids. So that's why when you drink water, your body has to, you know, your beautiful magical body that's keeping your homeostasis down has to figure out, okay, well, now what do I do with this increase in pressure? Your kidneys literally are pressure valves. Like, that's literally how they function. All of the nephrons in there are literally just waiting for blood pressure, right? That's why a lot of blood pressure diseases also have a kidney component,
Right.
It can also create kidney disease. It's because they literally are dependent on high pressure, low pressure,
Mhm.
right? And things being able to flow at a proper rate. So you drink water, your cells are so dry that they have no electrolytes, no balance to be able to hold on to those.
Totally.
It's like rain in the desert.
Yeah.
There's a flood and then it's gotta go. Flash flooding.
Yeah.
Right?
And it doesn't really stay. It doesn't hold on. So
Yeah.
to me, what's coming to mind right away is that water is not the right solution there.
Correct.
It's something else.
Correct.
Okay.
Water is not the answer.
It's not.
Normally, if you think about this, if you think about having 2 glasses of water on your counter,
Mm.
and then on one of those you pour in a little bit of oil. Yeah?
Oil. Add
Yeah.
oil to water.
Just think about it.
Okay.
What's going to happen if you left those 2 glasses there for 2 weeks?
Oh wow. So the oil would cover the top, and none of the water would evaporate, right?
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And every single, for the most part, every cell in the animal kingdom,
Mhm.
and our bodies included, is covered in what? But a lipid layer.
A lipid layer.
It's covered in fat.
Oil.
And so
Yeah.
there's actually that same process that I just mentioned, the one glass that's going to evaporate out eventually, and the other, no matter how many salts it has in it, it's still going to evaporate out. And then you have the other that actually has a coating that holds it, that contains it, that is smoothing, right? That process that creates more longevity for that process.
Right.
Every single cell in your body needs that, right?
It's true. And you know what else oil helps with? When you're constipated.
It is the
Yeah,
thing people should be
it's the
taking.
thing.
So I actually find, most people, if they're struggling with chronic constipation, and even just a lot of chronic gut diseases, if they swap out supplementing with all the bullshit, and one of those bullshit things, being fiber,
Mhm.
switch it for a teaspoon of olive oil, a teaspoon of ghee, that's clarified butter for those who don't know, a teaspoon of coconut oil. That, for the most part, will be doing a whole world of good
Wow.
that the fiber never did.
Will people be running to the bathroom? Have you seen that with your clients?
Right
Like-
after that?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, because that to me would be like the number one fear. It's like, no, I don't want to try it, right? Like, what other fears
There's
are
a lot of fears
exactly
making those changes.
What other fears or pushback do you hear from people that maybe we can just dispel right now and save them a bunch of trouble? Like, what do people what do people say to you when you might recommend that? What's their pushback usually?
Most of the times it's around like, is there any way to make it taste better? Right? Especially when it's like ghee, especially if I'm recommending clarified butter, it's like, is there any way to make it not taste like ghee? And it's like, well, what I recommend in those cases is actually a cup of warm water with that spoon of oil, because then it's a little bit easier to go down. Or make a tea.
Make a tea.
Yeah. And so a big trend, talking about trends, that I actually think should stick around, is like bullet coffee.
Yes.
Right? And for those who are not familiar, bullet coffee is actually adding like coconut oil or butter or clarified butter, right, to coffee, right? Because coffee is abrasive to most people's gut, not everybody's gut, but for most people, it kind of sends you to the bathroom a lot quicker than you would thought. For a lot of people's guts, it's actually quite acidic.
Gets things moving.
It's diuretic. It gets things moving, so then it's going to contribute to more dryness, right? And so actually having that oily component, I think, is brilliant.
Okay.
I think it actually does a great service
Yeah.
to one another,
I
those
feel
two
like
together.
I feel like that trend of bullet coffee was so popular like 20 years ago, 25 years ago. That's when I first heard of it, and then it kind of went away. Like, or maybe I'm just not in that community anymore of people who would go for it. I think it was like the CrossFit group. They're the people who would like really get into the bulletproof coffee.
Yeah.
So
well, like
okay,
even
cool.
doing something like that, right? It's not that far out on a limb. It's like it's not that nobody's ever never put oil inside of their drink, right? It's just actually kind of thinking of it that way. Like, okay, could you make, I don't know, think of like hot chocolate or like whatever your like warm, cozy beverage is, like put a little bit of oil.
Or like also, I feel like maybe you could just take a spoon, put the oil, down it, then drink normal. Or do you really think it needs to be kind of together? Do you know what I mean?
It doesn't necessarily need to be together, but this is just, the thing that I've seen a lot of people, their resistance is because they've never done it. So obviously things you've never done are kind of weird. And especially when you aren't fully sold on like, is this really going to work?
Yeah.
Because I've been struggling with this for a long time, right? And so a lot of people do have a lot of fear of letting go of supplements and fear of letting go of medications and fear of letting go of things that have kept them at a certain baseline for a long time, even when those things are not solving the issue.
Yeah, well, they fear regression, right? They feel like it might get worse, which obviously no one wants.
Which is why it is important, I think to like work with somebody who is very qualified, and why even then, when I say very qualified, I think, yes, having a medical professional is very important. Like if there's, and someone that you trust, ideally someone you can be on the vibe with, somebody who you wants to understand your body, but also understand that complementary medicine is a growing part of the future.
Yeah. So
like having your Ayurvedic practitioner or your Chinese medicine practitioner. I mean, like 80 years ago, having a chiropractor was like a witch doctory. And like now most people are going to the chiropractor. And even acupuncture, right?
Totally. And a lot of these things are being covered by insurance, right? Just talking from like a United States audience.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, more and more.
Yeah. My next question is around nervous system and dysregulation. Like we've all been there. So like what are some things that you found helpful for yourself when you do feel a bit dysregulated and that you need to like boom, bring it back to baseline? What are some things that have helped you?
Okay, I'm going to approach this from two places.
Okay.
The first one is gut health, and the second is more of yoga and biomechanics place, okay? So the first thing is, when I've been feeling dysregulated, the first thing that I go back to are those questions, right? Of like, what am I feeling? What do I need? And normally, when you're not regulated, there's a reason, yes? And normally that reason also requires some sort of like bouncing back, right? So there's a trigger, but then there's also like, well, how do you heal from the trigger? Or how do you move on from the trigger? How do you not just stay in the triggered space? And most of the time, if we think about that happening in a relationship, right? Maybe somebody you're very close to said something that really upset you, or that it rubbed you the wrong way, whether or not it was a projection on your end, like it just, maybe it crossed a boundary, crossed a limit, didn't feel good.
Right.
But it can't just fester. Like maybe something has to be said. Maybe you have to approach that person, right? Maybe you have to bring that up to the surface. But then when you bring that up to the surface, you don't just want it to continue. You bring it up to the surface, ideally, so that circumstance can change, right? And so you don't have to continue to be re-triggered,
right?
Because then is it healing? If you just, staying in a space where it's just constantly triggering and constantly, making you feel worse about yourself or whatever, right? It's just not working. No. So what is the response that you need is a nourishing one, right? It's care. You need to know someone cares. You need to know someone's there to nourish you. Someone's there to take care of you. Someone's there to recognize what you have to say is important and recognize that your safety and your feeling good is important. So why gut health, right? Why cooking yourself a nourishing meal? Because how can you really heal a response that is so ancestral, right? We're talking about nervous system, like fight, fright, freeze. You didn't choose any of these. It's just built into just built in the hardware, baby. So then what? Like, are you gonna try and like energy your way out of it, or can you recognize like, no, I'm also in a physical body that's having a physical response. It's having a physical shutdown, you know? And I don't see why, as a culture, we see nervous system dysregulation different than any other sickness. I don't understand, personally.
We don't talk about it. We don't understand it, right?
Well, because, and I think this is the split of like physical health and mental health. Like they're two separate things. Whereas, I mean, the body keeps the score being such like a revolutionary thing was like for the West recognizing, wow, these might be connected.
No,
you know?
Oh, no.
And then when we actually look at all of the new science around gut health, it's like, oh, gut-brain axis. Oh, the gut is your second brain. Oh, the gut actually is responsible for making 90% of serotonin. Oh, serotonin might influence your overall sense of well-being.
Who knew?
So how do you then create a space for yourself in order to do that bouncing back from a trigger? You nourish the shit out of yourself. And you eat really well.
Yes.
The thing is that eating well, as I mentioned, is not so easy as like, I'm just going to do the healthy thing, right?
Well, it requires us to get through the BS that's out there, right?
To like, understand what's healthy for you.
Yes. Oh, that too, because we are all individuals, and my healthy isn't necessarily your healthy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because think about this too, like if you went, I'm feeling shit, I need a good nourishing meal, but I go over to your house and you're like, I made, and it's like something I would never eat, you know? It's like, oh yay. Right? Like,
thank you so much.
Yeah.
No. No offense. Like, it's just not my healthy.
Yeah,
I can't.
exactly.
I can't.
Yeah.
This will make me feel worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that it was your intention.
And so then the choice is like, do I go down that road of things that are going to make me feel worse? Sure, consciously, do whatever you want, babes. But like, can you also then eat things that are going to be nourishing? So like soul foods, soupy foods, well-cooked foods, easy to digest foods, right? Are generally like cooked and warm, not blended up and not frozen, right? Like it needs to be something your grandmother would have eaten. It needs to be something your grandmother would have made you. Like if you can step into that space and let that deeper ancestral knowing that's inside all of us like hold you through those tough times, oof, there's a lot of power there. So that, you know, starts with having to like care for your body, right? Like care for your body, especially when someone's in a chronic state of that, whether that's burnout, whether that's healing from other types of trauma, whether that's any sort of mental health disease space. We're just seeing more and more that it's like that is so connected with gut health. And frankly, I don't see how you can come to a healthier place mentally when literally your whole brain is bathed in your blood, and your blood chemistry literally comes from what you eat.
And we are what we eat. Yeah. That's it. This is nothing more than what we eat.
Yeah.
It's not
like where
anything
else did any of that come from?
Yeah.
So it's like I don't see how we can make that line any straighter. Like I don't see how we can get to point A and point B any quicker without involving gut health in the conversation.
Exactly. And just naturally and in general, right? Like we all have been in that experience of feeling whatever emotion it was, like feeling in a way we didn't want to feel, and then having a meal and being like, oh, I was just hungry. Right? Like that reaction of like, oh man, like maybe I overreacted, or why was I so confused about why I didn't feel good? It was just so obvious.
Yeah.
Just needed a meal.
And I will say this too, like, you know, there's times when, you know, and I can speak to my past, and I think actually a lot of my past issues, mental health struggles really contributed to my gut dysbiosis and my gut issues, because, I mean, when's the last time you haven't faced something that was very triggering or very scary or very overwhelming to your nervous system, and the first thing you want to do is eat? Like, for a lot of people, it actually totally shuts down your gut. And then there's a lot of people as well who have learned to use food as that coping mechanism.
Yeah, you get the two routes. No food, too much food, right?
Yeah.
And wrong food. Yeah, you're right.
And so, or even like too much of what we think is healthy, right? Like sort of...
rice cakes. I'm thinking of like rice cakes and peanut butter and jelly or something. It's like, oh, but it's got fruit. It's got...
exactly.
It's like, oh no!
or that I need to be healthy harder. right? And it's still being
Yeah.
hard on yourself. Like
Yeah.
it's not quite anorexic, but it's not quite healthy. You know, like
Because it's not coming from the I love myself, it's
Yeah.
coming from the
this needs to change.
this needs to change, or I hate myself, right?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And
Yeah.
so if I can loop back around to the second bit, which is actually, the main type of yoga that I practice and teach is called Forrest yoga.
Mhm.
And it's not forest because it's done in the forest. It was created by a woman named Anati Forrest, who was a pioneer and is a pioneer in the world of natural healing. And she herself struggled with a lot of addiction and a lot of trauma growing up. And she went to India, early on when a lot of Americans were going to India to like, oh, what's this yoga thing, right? In the past, 100 years or so that we've been quote unquote discovering yoga.
Discovering yoga.
Yeah, and she, nevertheless, like she studied with Patabi Joyce, she studied with the Iyengar, but because of her particular, what she felt in her body, and let's just take like Shivananda style, for example, right? If anyone's ever practiced Shivananda style, or if you haven't, you do a pose and these are not necessarily like easy poses. We're talking like headstand, wheel, like these are like kind of advanced poses. And then you lay down Shavasana for a few minutes, right? You lay down, you lay flat, you let your body integrate that, and then, okay, another pose. And she recognized that was so painful for her body to get cold in between poses. She needed to stay hot. She needed to keep her blood moving because her body was so used to being in a functional freeze.
Wow.
And I think this is the thing for so many people. If a lot of people, I think, that come to a space of like chronic nervous system dysregulation, what we're living is a functional freeze. Like you can be a functional person in the world, but there's parts of you that are frozen. When I say frozen, it's like there's parts of your nervous system that get easily overwhelmed. There's parts that easily shut down, or there's parts that easily vacate. And I can absolutely look back in my history and look at areas that I would struggle with, right? And that's why I struggled with a lot of addictive habits and why I struggled with a lot of numbing behaviors, was because those feelings were overwhelming. And so I love Forrest yoga because it's so biomechanically informed, and so like it's so good for healing physical injury, because you get hot and because you really work with a lot of the connective muscles that are the most important when it comes to like compensation patterns, and it also strengthens your body because the areas that are most prone to get injured are weak. Weak and tight, and so when we can actually like loosen those up but also create more strength, and we create more resilience. And then there's another very particular thing about Forrest yoga that I love. Because Anna developed this system in a different way from these other systems she was very much taught. Like take Iyengar yoga, for example. It's very much about alignment, right? And getting the right alignment. And she recognized, well, what about when that doesn't work for me? For example, a lot of the traditional yoga poses are like you look up, say triangle pose, you look up, your neck should be here, your drishti, your where you're looking should be in a certain place. And she, whenever she would look up, it would trigger an intense migraine because of the story that her body was used to.
Her history,
her
trauma.
history, and her traumas, and everything she had lived to. Is like when she would twist her neck in a certain way, trigger, and what would it trigger? And then a migraine for like several days. So she was like, how can I stay dedicated to my yoga practice? How can I stay dedicated to my healing path? Well, I have to make this work for me, right? And so one of the questions we ask in Forrest yoga is, what part of this can I do?
Ooh, I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
It's such a more empowering question. It goes for everything in life. So it's not like, how can I make myself fit this pose? It's how can I make this pose fit me right now where I'm at?
Right.
And it's such an empowering question because it's also this notion of like, we're not meant to just fit what society wants.
Yeah.
And on a micro scale, we can't just follow alignment principles that somebody else made forever. There comes a time when actually we should be able to get skillful enough in our own bodies and with our feelings and with our triggers and with our symptoms and with our whatever we're walking around with, where we can say, well, how can I actually make this work for me? Right? And so it's not so based on alignment as a system as it is about the feeling process. It's the process of feeling that comes through each pose, right? And so one of the things we do in Forrest yoga is we focused on the spot. And it's to say in the beginning of practice, you could say, what's an area in your body? This is one that I love. I actually taught this morning. Think of an area that you maybe have had a complicated relationship with.
We all have that.
We all have that.
We all have that.
Right?
Yeah.
Whether somebody thinks your belly's too big, or in my
Mhm.
case, my chest is too weird because my sternum curves inward. It's called pectus excavatum, or I'm too skinny, or my collarbones are funky, or like whatever. Like my ass is too flat. I don't know. Maybe you think you have a weird back of your knee. I don't know.
I'm going to that Mean Girls scene where they're all looking in the mirror, right? And like, sometimes my breath is bad in the morning, right? It's like
Trying to figure out, oh my god, yes. So like, what is wrong with me?
Right.
Very that, you know. So it's like, so either pick an area where you've had a complicated relationship within the past, an area that holds shame or some sort of resentment towards yourself or towards society, or, you know, when you close your eyes and you feel and you connect to an essence of, is there something you're ashamed about your psyche?
Mm.
Is there something you're ashamed about emotionally? Is there something you feel guilty about? Where does that live in your body? Right? That's your spot.
Mhm.
And then throughout the practice, you track the sensations in that spot, and you send new breath in that spot. And with each inhale, it's new energy, and with each exhale, you dissipate the energy.
Right.
You let that shift, you let that change, but you observe it. And that's been so incredibly healing for me, because there's things I look at today and I'm like, holy shit, how did I get here? How did I get to a place where I can feel so empowered, and I can feel so in my center, and I can feel so much more ready and resilient to face whatever life throws at me. And I can do it in a way that honors myself and that honors others so much more realistically,
Yeah.
right? With healthy boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there's something that we see in our society of like, once again, it's the dichotomies of like, it's either this or that, right? And
It's so black and white right now.
it's very black and white. We don't recognize how much we're dancing in the spectrum between things.
And then how no one really fits the mold anyway,
Yeah.
right? Like even Democrat, Republican, there's so many people who are like, I'm a Democrat, but not all of it. I'm a Republican, but oh, I can't do it this way, right? It's like there are, and that's just one little example.
And then can you make
Yeah.
space for that complex conversation? Because that's where the meat is, and that's what we all really need to figure out together.
And that's where we actually end up, I don't want to say in the middle, but we end up in a place of more balance, or we end up in a place where there is estamos de acuerdo. Like we are, right? We agree. We can find a way to agree on something.
And because we're making space for more,
Yeah.
right? And
Expansion.
And I was going to say there's this dichotomy in our culture, specifically around strength and what it means to be strong, and also what it means to be open-hearted. And these two things are often like opposite sides of the spectrum.
Right, when you said that, I thought masculine, feminine. Right? Strength
people-
is masculine,
yeah.
open-heartedness is feminine. Like, that's kind of a typical breakdown of that. So, yeah.
Some people make it gendered. I see it as like there's an open-heartedness that is boundaryless and that is allows being walked all over, and that allows being pushed over, and allows whatever you want, and allows for a lot of like really dangerous things, right? At the end of the day, that are not honoring of your authentic feelings or your authentic energy levels, your authentic capacities, your authentic resources, your authentic desires, right? In the name of being open.
Or unconditional love, right? Like, yes, unconditional love is beautiful until it gets to that point, like you said, where people are walking all over it. It's like, well, then it's...
Until it's only for the other person.
Until it's only for the other person. And then how is
Yeah.
that unconditional?
Yeah.
It's very much conditional.
Yeah, very much conditioned on it being the other person's will and desire, not mine.
Exactly,
Right?
yeah.
Because we've created a hierarchy there.
Mhm.
And on the other end, like this idea of strength is like that we've, I guess, as male-bodied people, right? We're often taught of like, it's like, don't cry in front of everybody. And frick, like I feel like I don't even think I saw my mother ever cry.
Right.
Like it's to not express emotion, and it's to not open up, and it's to keep it all together, and it's to like make it look like you have it all together, and it's to show up and be strong and be consistent and be.
And God forbid you're vulnerable, because what ends up happening is that when a man becomes vulnerable, the people close to him see him as weak, whether subconsciously or not. And then all of a sudden he gets put down a few pegs. And it's like, just for being vulnerable? Like, this is the thing that I thought people want. It's actually the thing that connects us with everybody else. I don't connect with people who brag about their accomplishments, but I connect with people who say, actually, here is when I was down and brought myself back up. And it's like, yes, that's vulnerable, but it also shows strength and growth.
Exactly. Because what happens in that place when we're shutting off to our emotions, right? When we don't show that, and we think we're being strong, but really we're just wasting all of our fucking energy holding up shields and holding up armor and building walls around ourselves to not let anybody really in. Right?
We're equivocating. We're not telling the whole truth, and therefore it's not true.
Exactly.
Right?
And the only person that withers the most in that, I mean, really everybody suffers
Yeah.
in that circumstance, right? In a family, for example, in a partnership,
Mhm.
everybody suffers. But the person inside those walls is starving for love,
Fuck.
right?
I swear, but
And connection,
Yeah.
right? But you're too busy continuing to repair the wall and continuing to make sure the shields are up
Mm-hmm.
to let anybody in,
Right.
or to let anything real out.
It's
And
like
so
the facade of the building is more important than the contents, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, that, but it also is the first thing that's gonna fall down
Mhm.
in the storm.
yeah, it's rigid. It's
Yeah.
not flexible. It's not resilient,
Mhm.
right? And so actually, I think when we can come to a place like recognizing that our strength comes from being in love with ourselves and comes from being able to share that love with others, at a level of our bodies and our needs, and at a level of our emotions and our hearts and our wants, and at a level of our spirit of recognizing that all of that's bound to evolve and to change.
Mhm.
And can we do that together, right? And can we do that together apart? Can we do that together with each other hand in hand,
Mhm.
right? It can look so many ways. And so it's we have to, I think, as a society and as individuals, like talking about healing and how we're healing, we have to be able to be adaptive.
Mhm.
And we have to embrace that we are made to be adaptive. And
Oh,
we're
yeah.
made to evolve. And it's like change is the only constant.
Yep.
And so I think the more skilled we get at that, and actually learning and understanding how to do the evolution process
Right.
well for ourselves and for others, that's a source of superpower.
Ooh, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot. This is maybe a similar topic, and it's also something you don't have to answer. But like, what do you feel still triggers you?
Mm.
Only because when we talk about healing, often what triggers us is something that we need to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I myself am still working with and still processing being fully seen and being fully vulnerable, and especially when it comes to emotions and expressing those wants and needs. Because I think it's been one really big part of my journey, a huge step in my journey, to be able to have that real conversation with myself. Because the reality is there was a time when that conversation was not happening with myself.
Mhm.
It was everything that I thought I should be, I thought I should do. It was very perfectionist, it was very outward oriented, it was very results driven. And it was not a safe space for my heart and for my feelings and for the softer creative part of me, right? That is in evolution, that is in flux. It was like, no, we have to drive the car this way. We have to go this way. Right?
And we have to take the highway. We can't take the back road, right?
Right. Yeah, because we have to get there now. 'Cause
Exactly.
there's a lot of pressure to perform and to be on time. Someone's timeline. I don't know who anymore, but like whatever. Someone made a timeline that we think we need to follow. And yeah, I've definitely done a lot of healing around this, but I think it's still a space where being really fully vulnerable and open to being seen and to being heard, especially when it's like that's a space of like standing in authenticity, and that's standing in power, and that's standing in like this just is what it is.
Yeah.
It's hard. I do come from a background of like really wanting to, one, put down my emotions, and two, really wanting to please others, out of a desire to make a very safe little container for myself. So as a young person, that did me very good as a little queer and as a person growing up in my particular family and the particular place and time where I did. But at the same time, all of that moved me further away from connecting to my body.
Mhm.
And so these days I am really grateful that I have a lot more resources to be able to say like, okay, I'm feeling a pounding in my heart, like I'm feeling a nervousness, I'm feeling an anxiety, because I know there's something powerful that needs to be said, or I know there's something truthful that needs to be said. And so over the last few years, like really worked on that and like say it, because it's not just you, it's spirit.
Yeah.
Like the universe wants to change through you in this moment when you're feeling triggered.
Mhm.
Change. Be the change. Like open that fucking door.
Yeah.
Because it's not just changing for you, it's changing for whoever else is involved.
Right.
And I think it was my fear of pissing somebody off, or my fear of repercussions, or my fear of being left, or my fear of violence being directed at me, whether verbally or physically or emotionally, based on my past, that it was that fear that kept me from like, oh, but like I can't just say this thing, right? I can't just say what I'm feeling, right?
That would be ridiculous.
That would be ridiculous. Because
Yeah.
what if, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then I eventually got to that space to ask what if with a different tone, and to get present enough in my body to say I can feel overwhelmed and I can still do what my spirit knows is the right fucking thing to do.
Yeah.
Right? And I can assume the best in another person, at least for right now. Right? I don't have to make excuses for them later. I don't have to try and piece through their childhood trauma, but I can just right now try and figure out, like, okay, I have within me the wherewithal and the power to say what needs to be said. Because when that can be said, evolution can happen on both parts.
Totally.
And when I'm staying in that dynamic where I'm too afraid to express, that dynamic continues to build, continues to get stronger, right? And I think that's the root of a lot of codependency for a lot of people, whether that codependency is, say, like with a partner or with a boss or with the workplace or with a job or with an ideal that you might have in your life of who you think you need to be, right? Not letting yourself express what is.
Yeah.
What is now, and also what wants to be, because sometimes those aren't the same thing, right? Sometimes you are in a place you don't want to be, and that doesn't mean you need to stay there.
Yeah.
You have every right and every ability to evolve and to take a step forward, to take a healing step, but oftentimes healing steps are brave steps.
Oh, totally. I mean, this is kind of touching upon, like, if there was actual truthful science around people who are in situations, relationships, family dynamics that they do not want to be in, I think the numbers would be incredibly high, almost universal.
Well, we have a 50% divorce rate.
I know, right? Well, there's one number, right?
Yeah.
But then it's interesting because you go to India, and I think that number is like not even 10%. It's really, really low. But there's something beautiful in it because it is an arranged marriage. It is about the marriage being more about all of the family together, right? Like the spouse's family, the wife's family, and the extension of that. And then it is actually, I see it as something about more unconditional love. It's like two people agreeing to make it work, right? So I don't know. But then on the other side, they're not really choosing their heart, right? They don't get to choose with their heart or with their experience or let love grow from nothing. They're kind of like put into a situation where love is being told to grow. It's like a petri dish. So it almost has that like falseness to it.
I think love's nature is to grow. I think love's nature is to expand. And I think we're all just in different containers. You know, we're all in different bodies. We're all in different cultures. We're all limited to a different mind, to a different language set of words. And, you know, some of us are lucky enough to be multilingual and have, you know, multiple things bouncing around our heads and multiple possibilities of what that could be. But we all have that, the access to a world that is incredibly rich and that is incredibly varied and is incredibly diverse. And it's one of our most fundamental strengths as a society and as a people and as a species is that we have that diversity, and it makes us stronger, it makes us more resilient. When we see even at the level of the gut, you know, it's like, well, what's a healthy gut? It's like, well, you have a diversity of healthy gut microflora, right? And you eat a diversity of foods, right? You can't just eat one food forever and feed all the bacteria. No, like we need a little something for a little bit of everybody, you
that
know?
variety, the difference.
And so I think like all of us play a role, all of us play a part. And realistically, the world is so much bigger than I can fathom, frankly.
Yeah.
You know, I can really only just see from my two little eyes. These little ones, you know, and try and do my best for what's immediately around me.
Yeah.
Because I do think there's maybe some stress, especially with people who, those of us who care, want to be of service. Like, I think there is some stress of like wanting to either help the whole world or wanting to do it in such a big way, and like having to like fix all the world's systematic issues that like were thousands of years in the making before you even showed up, babe. So it's like, I think a lot of people just take on a whole lot of responsibility and also like not quite the right ones.
Yeah.
You know?
Or like, we can't change the world until we change ourselves, right? It's like, do that first. Just, you know, literally
or at least be in that, you know?
in that, yeah. Change the way, I would say not change the way, but it's like live the way you want the world to be.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, then you become an inspiration, right?
Yeah, it spills over.
Yeah, for sure.
It spills over. I mean, if I hadn't had all my mentors all these years, and if I hadn't taken all these steps, like I wouldn't be having this conversation.
Exactly. All the growth, right? Okay. Change of topic then. So in terms of like wellness books, I think a lot of people are very book focused. Do you have a few books that you find yourself recommending or that you think would be required reading in school?
Oof. Yeah. Okay, so there's one book that I love by Dr. Suhas. who's an amazing Ayurvedic doctor based in California. I think he's based in California. His book is called Change Your Schedule, Change Your Life. God, such a good book. Because it goes into one of the things I teach about in my gut health program, and he was a big inspiration for that, of like, Ayurveda is so about rhythms, but sometimes certain people focus a little bit more on the food, right? Like on the diet and on the nutrition, but his whole book, his whole premise is essentially that like you can be eating all the right things, quote unquote, but at the wrong time and still be doing just as much damage. And it's such an interesting book. It's such an interesting read. I mean, just things that he draws from both Ayurveda and science, studies about, like, say, one group is eating less calories, but they're eating most of the bulk of their calories late in the evening. One eats more calories than the other group, but it's mostly in the early hours of the day.
Right.
Those people actually lose weight.
Right.
Other people mostly gain weight.
And it's counterintuitive because we're taught, calories matter. Yeah, exactly.
Calories in, calories out, and they're all made the same.
Right.
But the timing is everything.
Yes.
Timing is everything.
Oh, yeah.
And so that book is so interesting for that reason. Talks about like the circadian rhythms of our gut microbiome, right? Because that's a big part of it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we think that, we have a circadian rhythm, but the reality is your brain operates on one circadian rhythm, your stomach operates on another circadian rhythm, all of your gut, and then actually all of the trillions of organisms each have their own clock.
Right.
Because they're all different species, right? They're all working a bit differently. So if we can't sync up those clocks, there's always going to be something a little off in our health, right? Because the very specific and important components like head, gut, and then all of your gut flora, if those aren't operating together, of course there's going to be some sort of dysregulation, whether it's nervous system or whether it's gut related.
Right. Or mental health or rashes, it shows up in the skin. That's so true.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's one great book. Another book that I love is actually, for people who are interested in Ayurveda and wanting to learn a little bit more about, like, what's my unique body type and how can I start, right? There's actually a book called Eat, Feel Fresh that I love. It's by Sahara Rose. She was one of my first inspirations. I remember like going to work back in this era where I was really struggling with my health and I would like have a podcast a day, keeps the doctor away,
Well, you're on a journey of learning, is that
Yeah,
okay,
I was starting to learn about Ayurveda, and I think she maybe has a bit of a different focus in her work today. I know she's out there helping people heal the blocks that are in between them and connecting with their dharma, connecting with their purpose. But at that time, she was sharing a lot about Ayurveda. In her book, Eat, Feel Fresh, she has multiple books. But that book I love in particular, it's so beautiful. I remember taking part in her launching that book. She had like gone to India and like did all this beautiful photography. And it's all plant-based, Ayurvedic inspired recipes. So it's not just Indian food, it's actually there's like plant-based burgers in there, and then there's like all these desserts, and there's all these drink suggestions, and I love like how it's made. It's so colorful. It's so like just one of those things you want to eat with your eyes, like. And sometimes I get in a rut. Like I grew up in a family where like sometimes like every food on the plate is the same color. Do you know what I mean? Like where everything is
gray.
Everything's like
gray.
It's like today's a white day. Like there's some mashed potatoes. There's some white bread. There's some like chicken,
cauliflower.
And it's like kind of the same color. Right? Or like or the days where everything is brown, and then it's like today's a brown. Right? Not a lot of green, not a lot of other things going on. Right? And this book is just like a feast for your senses and for your eyes. And she talks about the doshas, and even like throughout the book, it's like, add more of this for vata, or omit this for, this ingredient for pitta.
Like how to modify it based on your dosha.
Which is really cool. So it's fun. Like it's intuitive, like helps you figure out your dosha, your dosha prakriti in the beginning, which, I love to teach people more about your dosha vikruti, because I think, it's one thing to treat like who you are. It's another thing to treat what's going on right now. Like what's your issues, right? And I think that's really where we need to focus. But
to get you out of like a crisis.
Like, and then if you're like, if everything's hunky-dory and you're super balanced, well then you still need to be eating for the season. So like it is a bit more complex, but I would very much recommend that book because the recipes are great. I left it at a retreat center and it like somebody took it off,
Yeah.
Because it's such a good book. Whoever you are, if you're listening, please return that book.
Don't worry about it. Postage is insane.
Actually,
nowadays.
no.
Ebook is fine.
No. Actually, just pass it on. Pass on the good favor.
Oh, I like
Those
that.
two books I love. There's actually another book, but it's a bit more. I don't know. I think it should be required reading for every yogi.
For every yogi.
Yeah, specifically, which is a very set of people.
we're a special breed.
Yeah, but if you're really interested in yoga and you're interested in learning and deepening that practice and deepening your knowledge, the book is called Yoga. It's by one of my mentors, Indu Arora, and she is amazing. She's a teacher who's an Ayurvedic yoga therapist. She's been studying yoga like in Gurukul style, like with her teachers, and she was 16, and so she's just brings like a whole nother flavor of yoga that we all need to taste if we're studying yoga as practitioners anywhere in the world, whether that's in the West or in India. Like just the depth of her knowledge, and for me in particular, like how she blends in yoga and Ayurveda is so essential. Like also if you're interested in deepening your practice, her courses online are fabulous. Like you think you know what the chakras are until you study with Indu, and like you think you know how Ayurveda and yoga are related until you study with her, and then it's like, at least that was my case. I thought I knew a whole lot about pranayama until I studied it with Indu, and like even as a Ayurvedic practitioner who does body work, I give marma, which is the pressure points, right? The sacred pressure points. But how does that play in a role in yoga? Didn't have really any clue of that. Didn't even cross my mind until I studied with her.
Okay.
So it's like kind of an up level to anybody's practice who really wants to just go deeper and recognize like yoga is a thousands-year-old ancestral, rich, like also super diverse practice. It's not like there's just like one Bible of it, but to be able to study with somebody who's like so well steeped and so well versed and who's clearly spent so much time like honestly and authentically processing the truths of that information. I think it's one thing to like somebody read a quote in a yoga class and it's like something they found this morning on Pinterest, or like or they like flipped through in a book, but it's like different when somebody's transmitting something that is very lived, right? And that is very like it's very deep in that way, right? It's just richer. The whole experience is richer. And so her book Yoga, I think it's An Ancient Heritage in Tomorrow's Future or something like that is the subtitle, but it's very that. It's like it is this ancient heritage that's a heritage of humanity. That is something we all have access to because we're all built the same, at the end of the day, but we're all built a little bit different, and that's where Ayurveda comes in. Right? And also everything is constantly changing, everything is constantly evolving. So how do you, in a world where we're all built in a way that we can access higher levels of awareness and consciousness, we can heal, but everything around us is always moving. How do you start that?
How do you grasp it? Yeah. It's like trying to catch a plane out of the sky.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I love these are three of my fave books out there.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I'll be putting that in the description. So.
Oh, can I add one more?
Yeah,
Also,
yeah.
Fierce Medicine. Fierce Medicine by Forrest. If anybody is interested in learning more about Forrest yoga, or if you're interested in doing that deep healing work of like working with nervous system regulation, like this is the book, and that is like the place to start because of how Anna shares. When I talked about like picking a spot and then doing that work, there's so much in there that's so rich, like talking about how to work with your fears, how to work with your shame, how to walk pain free, right? How to deal with chronic pain issues, how to connect to your heart, right? What does that really mean? How to understand your spirit, like, whether for you it's the higher self or universe or source, like how do you actually bring that into your day-to-day?
Yeah.
How do you make a commitment to walking that path? So her book is also amazing. It's an inspiration. Every time I like reread it, I'm like, how did I not get that the first time I read it, like it's one of those, it's a
You can read it many times.
I can read it many times and absolutely get more and more and more. Really, I think any book can be like that, but specifically because it's such a rich spiritual journey, but it also has like practical exercises and even a bit of introduction to Forrest yoga in there, like that you can just do. If you're working at a desk, like you can stretch out your neck and you're actually loosening up tension that your body would otherwise read as a trigger or as a stress, right? People don't think about that, right? Like, oh, we think we're so triggered, we're so stressed, but it's not just other people. It's like you were already set off. Like we talked about meditation, because what if that tension was already just like at its boiling point? Right. So actually being able to work from the inside out on all of those precursors, on those conditions, on those circumstances, they'll create a space for healing. Fierce Medicine.
Okay.
Such a good book.
And you said that a lot of books are like that, where you can kind of go back and get more information. I totally agree. I do think there is a spectrum, and what I tend to find are the books that are like kind of like the Bhagavad Gita or the Bible even, those are the books that are like, ooh, like you kind of get something new and you get something what you need in that moment that you're reading it. So to put her in that kind of category, it's like she's in good company, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, like,
Yeah.
you know, when you look at the Bible, when you look at the Bhagavad Gita, like, you look at even any, like, oral tradition that's lasted for so long, like, it stood the test of time for a reason. For a reason. So that's why I say, like, yoga, Ayurveda, like, it's not that they're not scientific, it's the science has been looking in the wrong direction.
Well, you know? To me, I see science as another arm of religion, or maybe if that's not the best word, maybe spirituality. And it's like, you know, a lot of religious and spiritual people I know don't need the science because you said it earlier, the N is one, we are the experiment. And why do I need a scientific study to prove to me what I've already felt in my body, right? And felt in my existence? I don't, right?
But this is the thing, right? Like, there is this, the place that science, the role that science plays, I think, is to help find truth, right? Like, at the end of the day, is what it's about. It's like, how can I prove this is true for everybody in the most number of circumstances, taking out all the, you know, the other variables. And it's like, well, that becomes difficult when we're in a reality that everybody actually is a bit different, and that is difficult. So, you know, that's why I say the future of medicine, the future of healing, you know, is not just Ayurveda, but it's actually Ayurvedic principles applied to, right? So this idea of, like, food being functional. Functional medicine is one of the greatest, you know, the newest, hottest things that I don't see going away anytime soon because it's really effective. Why is it effective? Functional medicine treats the root cause of a symptom or of an issue. That's exactly what Ayurveda does. It's exactly what traditional Chinese medicine does. It's exactly what most ancestral medicines do because, well, if you don't treat the root cause, it's just going to keep growing, or maybe you cut off this symptom and then now it's in your skin. Okay, now you have something for your skin and then now it's your hormones are fucked. Right? Or whatever, right? So it's like functional medicine uses things like lifestyle and diet and sleep and stress relief and nervous system regulation, right? For treating the root cause. That's exactly what Ayurveda is. Personalized medicine. So even talking about, like, epigenetic medicine, right? Epigenetics is very Ayurvedic based. Epigenetics is all about how certain foods, certain diets, certain rhythms, right, of doing certain activities actually influence the expression of your genes. So it's not to say it changes your DNA, but it changes what parts of your DNA basically make it to the surface. Right? Which parts of your DNA get expressed. And that's exactly what the whole conversation around, like, 95% of most chronic diseases being reversible, maybe not reversible, but at least being preventable, is all an epigenetic conversation.
Totally.
Right? We all have cancer in our genes. Most of us have, whether it's diabetes, or we have some sort of degenerative thing, or we have some sort of autoimmune, inflammatory, like, all of that already exists, right? But why isn't it expressing? Well, it's because of the decisions you have or haven't made, you know, or what your body has or hasn't lived through.
Food, environment, and mind. Right? It's like those are the things that are gonna impact that.
And so that's very, you know, Ayurvedic based. Even talking about circadian rhythms, so chronobiology. A lot of people don't know about this.
I've never heard of this, chronobiology.
Chronobiology is this whole notion that living organisms respond to being on a planet that has cycles, that has rhythms, both of seasons and also of days, right? And so that's the whole notion. I mean, you can't have epigenetics if you don't have that, right? Because, like, there's the factor of, like, yes, the quality of the food, the function of the food, right, that I talked about with functional medicine, but then there's also the timing of the food, right? So when?
Are you picking it when it's ripe? Are you eating it when you're ready to absorb the nutrients that are there? All that.
And so, all of that, chronobiology, and then personalized medicine of actually, like, you know, anybody listening, just ask yourself, like, would you appreciate more being treated like you're on a factory farm? Or would you appreciate actually having something tailored to you and somebody understand you and somebody
holistically?
I mean, ideally, but even if we're just talking about, I mean, well, and then, right, even if we're just talking about, like, what your insurance can pay for, like, well, yeah, maybe that would involve, like, a nutritionist and a psychologist and a doctor and all these other modalities, right? Like, it could be a lot of modalities, but ideally to give attention to all these different parts of you, these aspects of you, your physical body, your mind, your emotions, your diet, your sleep habits, right? All of these things that need tending, right? And Ayurveda just happens to be kind of one of those mothers here on the planet. It's like, well, actually, it all comes down to how we're built and how we work, right?
And it's like I don't want a listener to think that all this stuff is so simple, or the opposite, that it's all so complicated. And it's like, yes. You know what I mean? It's like, yes. Yes, and because it can be, it really can be quite complicated, but at the same time, it's like, but just try something, and try something different, try something new, and see what works, and like the good will stick, right?
Yeah.
The good stuff will kind of bubble up to the surface.
Well, and the thing is, like, so many people are very, just based on the culture we've grown up in, a lot of people are very invested in thinking that a quick fix is the way to go.
Right.
Like, oh, I have a headache, or my shoulder aches, or, okay, so I'll just take ibuprofen, right? Without recognizing ibuprofens, we already know, are very much linked to, like, ulcers, for example. So, like, okay, what do you want to deal with? Do you want to deal with the root cause of the pain? Right, which may actually also be related to gut stuff, which may be related to stress levels, which may be related to pushing yourself too hard, right? Not wanting to take a pause, not wanting to slow down, trying to push past your body's limits, and your body's literally screaming at you. Or do you want to pop a pill, let it go away, keep pushing, keep going, harder, until...
You need surgery.
Yeah, until now you have to take more drastic measures, right? Or can we not make it so hard on ourselves?
I really see pain. I have a very different relationship with pain nowadays. Like, I see it as an absolute gift. If I am triggered by something, if I have physical pain, if I'm emotionally upset by something, I'm like, okay, cool. An opportunity to really look at what's going on and kind of nip it in the bud. I don't want to say once and for all, but like, like it actually can be like that sometimes. You can actually, if you sit with a pain long enough and you really figure out what's going on, and I don't mean aggravate a pain, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying observe a pain and see what the root cause is.
Well, even then, there are studies out there that mindfulness meditation on pain is more effective than painkillers.
Right.
Like, being able to observe your pain, stick with it, pay attention to it, it is more likely to dissipate.
Dial your pain up, dial your pain down, and then you actually start to see the control you have.
Yeah, it's much more effective, especially long term, than reliance on a medication.
Exactly. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Science is I appreciate science for the advancements that we have, like how deeply we can look into a cell and to DNA, and to like understand the mechanisms behind it all, right? And then thinking about those mechanisms, how we might intervene in a different way. Like, it's fascinating. We're at a cutting edge. Like, it's amazing. But at the same time, it's like, but we don't need to reinvent every single wheel.
Totally.
As humans that live in animal bodies, that we actually know a whole lot about.
Already. For thousands of years we've known.
So then it's just, how can we, tap back into that a little bit more?
Yeah, I agree. Like, the thought that came to my mind right away is the work that Dr. Joe Dispenza does. Like, I'm reading Supernatural, and there is so much science, but at the same time, there's so much yoga. It's just yoga. It's just all the stuff that we've learned through yoga teacher trainings and experience, and just the world of the esoteric and the spiritual. And it's like, I love it. Like, it kind of makes me laugh that it's like, oh, like we just kind of keep going back, don't we? We're just like, okay, cool, discover more things, but what we're discovering is that the old stuff is true, right? Or we're just putting new words and labels and mechanics, and we have new views, like you said, like we can see deeper into the cell. So it's like, okay, cool, we've got the 20x magnified image now, but with that, we have the information that we've already known. And the thing that we should be doing, it's still the same advice from 5,000 years ago.
Yeah, this is the thing. So I mentioned way earlier in this conversation how like 4 of the last 10 years worth of Nobel Prizes in medicine have come basically from Ayurvedic principles just being proven. Like, one of those was actually around circadian rhythms. And yes, it was around the nitty picky, nitty gritty nitpicking, like what's the mechanism of all of this? How does a cell respond to the cycles of night and day, whether or not there's light and dark, right? Like, we are still on a planet that's revolving. So how is the cell responding to that? What cascades of chemical reactions? Thinking about how nighttime and sleep is when our cells start to repair. What triggers that, right? Is it just the lights went out, or what is that, right? So there was actually a study, and I don't remember if it was in 2017, but anyways, you can just look it up if you look up the last, winners of the Nobel Prizes in, I think, physiology and medicine. It was all about circadian rhythms, right? Circa comes from the Latin cycle, right? Circle or cycle, And then Dien is a day, right? But Dina in Sanskrit means a day, and Charya means a cycle. And Dinacharya is exactly one of the things you would learn if you ever started studying any Ayurveda. That's your daily routines.
The literal timing of the food.
It's literally and like tongue scraping or abhyanga and oil pulling, like all of these things that people start to learn when they start to learn about Ayurveda. It's like, that's all a morning thing, because your body your body just did all this resting and repairing, and it has all this
pushing out, right?
It has this metabolic waste that it's ready to let go of. So do things to help it let go of that, so that you're ready for a fresh new day. Yeah. That's why we brush our teeth in the morning, right? It's like that you just know you want to wash your face, right? It's just, we know that it's inherent in us, but there's certain ways we can support the rhythms of our body. And same thing at night. The body's about to prepare to go into that cycle, so it actually shouldn't still be trying to hype up. So when people are like going to the gym late at night, or people are watching a ton of screens and getting a lot of blue light, like all of this is actually very antithetical, or you're checking your email late into the night, it's very antithetical to what your body is designed to do. Right? And that's all Dinacharya, right? It's like, and we would call that Ratricharya at nighttime rituals. Of like, how do you prepare then to rest, right? Which a lot of it's working with your digestion, making sure everything's nice and digested and moving along, because rest and digest, right? But we don't want to be putting more in. We don't want to continue to ingest, right? We don't want to continue to ingest information. We don't want to continue to ingest more food. We actually want to give it a pause so your body can go on vacation and do its work at night. We all want more vacation days. That's why I always tell people, like, good Lord, let your body rest.
Yes.
Like your cells are working overtime.
All the time.
Yeah. But like, how can we support those processes, right? Another Nobel Prize was about autophagy in these last few years.
Fasting.
Yes. Right? Ayurveda's talked about that for thousands of years, right? What's the benefits of fasting? And this is the thing, I talk about the crunchy, munchy foods, because it's not just that it's dry when we eat a lot of like crunchy chips and nuts, and even if you're more on the my nuts are healthy and maybe my chips are not so healthy, but I eat the nuts, so it's a healthy thing. Even then, every time you're ingesting food, a whole cascade of reactions has to happen in your gut, and so if that you're triggering that to start over, if there was stuff that's already in there that hasn't quite finished its process, then it's not necessarily going to finish as it would have. Right? And then if you add to that, sort of talking about autophagy, like fasting, intermittent fasting is another big trend that we can see, but I sincerely believe people are doing it in a very kind of willy-nilly, like, let's just see what happens when we don't eat most of the day and we only eat all these calories super late into the night, when our body literally empties half. Like, we know that our gut empties at half the rhythm at night and in the later hours in the day than it does during the day. So
eat with the sun, right? That's like a big thing in Ayurveda.
Yeah, Ayurveda's like eat when the sun is up, because actually that's when your gut is most active, when it's most likely to absorb, when your gut microbiome is actually awake and active and most likely to do its job properly, not when you're just shoving stuff in and your gut microbiome's asleep, right? And then your gut's not even producing the right enzymes or the right digestive fluids, because it's also like, wait, I thought I was off. Thought I was gonna get to sleep, right? And that's the thing, is like, when you're interrupting that process every little bit of the way, like, your blood sugar has no idea what to do, how to stabilize. All of that process becomes disruptive, and all of the rhythms of the body become out of sync, right?
It's, you're forcing a square peg into a round hole at that point. You're trying to get the body to do something it was not designed to do. You're trying to get it to do it at the wrong time as well. And with the wrong ingredients. Usually. Wow. This has been an amazing conversation. I want to have a part 2, but first I want to give you an opportunity to tell people how they can best get in touch with you or work with you, and also how you can best serve them, right?
Okay, well, yes, welcome anybody who wants to come hang out with me on Instagram, andrewdowdy.wellness. Dowdy is D-O-W-D-Y. As well, you can find me on andrewdowdy.com. And we'll have all of this in the show notes. Ways we can work together. I teach yoga classes online, and I also have an on-demand library. So if you are interested in getting to know Forrest Yoga or getting to know your body a little bit more, come and hang out with me. I have a monthly membership for that, so you can attend classes live, or you can just do the on-demand, because I myself know there's times where you don't want to be up at a certain time of day on a yoga mat, There's times when maybe like later in the afternoon just works better, or So I want to have that option as well for people to work in that on-demand way or come and be live, because there is a different energy too when you can be there live. And I also have a new program coming out that is Gut Health Mastery. And I'm so excited for this. And if whatever time you're listening to this, you don't get in on the first round, you can always get on the next wait list for a second round or whatever round it may be, because I have been basically pouring my heart, my soul into everything I've learned about gut health and everything I've seen over years of working with people from anything from like chronic gut diseases, whether that's IBS, IBD, even things like Crohn's and more like autoimmune conditions that affect the gut. Things like skin diseases, psoriasis, eczema in particular, chronic constipation issues, colitis, gastritis. I mean, really, like if it's gut related, babe, I got you. I got you. And it's probably not incurable. I think we can figure out a way.
Yes.
And my thing is to like help people move out of like a gut victim place, right? Where it's like, why is this happening to me? To having the power and the tools and the resources in a holistic manner to become gut health masters, right?
Gut empowerment.
Yeah. Empowerment from the gut, literally inside out,
yes,
right? Like
yeah.
it is about that, because I do understand the role of nervous system regulation. I understand the role of rhythms. I understand the role of like all of the psychology that goes into making new habits and what gets in the way when we actually start making habits that are very health supportive. A lot of us tend to have, if we came from any background of functional freeze or of any sort of dysfunctional background, when you start to take care of yourself, things start to feel a little different, right? And it's actually a little outside of the comfort zone that you had that's normally actually wasn't that great in the first place, right? Like if you're coming from a place of chronic stress, the comfort zone you were in, right, probably sucked, actually. Like it probably felt very uncomfortable. So then when you start to make changes and your body starts to feel healthier and you have more energy, there can be all sorts of resistance. And so that's also stuff that we work through and work with in this program, because my thing is, you can't just diet and then go to the gym more and really be as healthy as you want to be. And you can't just do those things to actually heal your gut. And realistically, healing your gut's the only way that you're going to ever deal with any of these other more chronic conditions.
Right.
There's no amount of Band-Aids that will ever work until you get to the root of it. But the root of it, as we've talked about, it's not really complicated, but it just involves actually restructuring your day to be about you and not about everybody else.
Yeah.
And when you can learn how to restructure your day and your diet and your food around what your body really needs, then you're in a very empowered space. So that's what Gut Health Mastery is all about.
Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And so what is the final message you would like to leave with our OMIs, our listeners?
I would love to leave everybody with the message that you are such an important part of this planet and you are here for a reason. And I hope you can feel that deep inside you. I hope you can feel that every cell in your body kind of lights up in a new way when you just hear that, when you just contemplate that. And that the reality is that even if you've been through very tough times, you've been through struggles, you've been through trauma, all of that stuff has no reason to hold you back, right? Because the reality is so many people on this planet have struggled in some way. And that doesn't have to keep you in a place where you are frozen or where you are stuck. So if you feel stuck in life, recognize there is help out there. There's always another hand here waiting to reach out for you. But be willing to take that first step for you as well and reach out, whether it's with a different Google search or whether it's one more podcast episode, whatever it is, things can and will line up for you the more that you dedicate to walking forwards. So continue to do it, stay strong, and know that there's so many people out here willing to support you and love you along that process, and ways that you can become more of a master of your own experience and change this shit up, because we need it, baby. We need it and we need you.
We need you. Well, you heard it here first, folks. And Andrew, thank you again so much for your time and attention and dedication and just essence. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been such an honor, been such a pleasure. Thank you for sharing this with more people, because we need it.
Exactly. So we want everyone to continue to heal so that you can not only heal yourself, but turn around and start to heal others. So this has been the How We're Healing podcast. Thank you. Yes! Hello, I'm Tristan. I was just like you. I wanted to become a yoga teacher. I noticed all the positive changes it brought to my life. I didn't want to have to travel, though, to do a yoga teacher training and all that goes along with that, right? Being put in a room with a bunch of strangers. What if I had to use the bathroom and I have to miss a part of the lecture and dealing with that awkwardness? I also didn't want to have to spend a fortune, and let's be real, yoga teacher trainings can be very expensive. Lastly, I wanted to be able to start teaching yoga right away because, if I'm honest, I felt ready before I was even certified. It's just what happens when you find something that really speaks to your soul and when you have that focus and when you have that discipline. For me, the program I wanted didn't exist, but now it does. I created it. I created the yoga teacher training that I dreamed of. It's a course that's affordable at just $99 a month. You can even finish everything within the first 30 days if you're super dedicated. But there's no pressure. Go at your own pace, it's there. Because of this also, you can start earning money right away. I give you the tools you need so that you can start earning. That means the course immediately starts paying for itself. Just in case that's not enough, there is also a 30-day money-back guarantee. I wanted to make it so that you have nothing to lose, an entire lifetime of yoga knowledge to gain. So what are you waiting for? Get started today. Go to shantiyogaschool.com to access the course now. That's SHANTI yogaschool.com.
Hey, it's Tristan again. Thanks for tuning in to How We Are Healing. I hope you found it meaningful. If you'd like to support the podcast, consider leaving a review or sending this episode to friends and family. Until next time, Omis, keep shining.